During the mythical era, the demon king of tyranny exterminated the humans and even killed the gods, but he sacrifices himself to bring peace. He reincarnates after 2,000 years, shocking his parents because he grows up in only a month, but he realizes that his existence was erased from history. The story begins in Delsgade, where his descendants are chosen to be trained at the Demon King's Academy. On the day of the entrance exam, we see a girl nervous about going to the academy, but she gets bumped and she drops her letter. But another boy picks it up and sees that her name is Misha Necron. He returns the letter as their parents make a scene, wishing them luck with the exam. They make their way to the entrance as he introduces himself as Anos Voldigode, and a boy suddenly appears to intimidate them, but Anos ignores him. The boy calls out to him and uses his fire magic as he reveals himself as Zepis, a noble from the Hindu family. But Anos doesn't know him, and as he sighs, the flames suddenly disappear. Zepis wonders what he did, so he explains his flames were weak, so he just blew it out, and he uses his voice to make him stay. He continues towards the entrance, where Anal announces that the practical exam is about to begin. Inside the academy, Anos learns that the first phase of the practical exam is a duel between the candidates, and the loser is dismissed, while the winner is accepted into the academy. Anos prepares to fight, and we see that his opponent is Zepis, but this time, he's wearing an anti-demonic armor, which blocks magic. So he becomes confident, and he pulls out a flaming sword, which was passed down to his family, saying it amplifies his magic. He charges at Anos, who mentions that it isn't impressive when it amplifies a weak user, and he blows out the flames. Everyone's shocked, but he decides to make things interesting, and declares that he won't move or use any magic to defeat him. He thinks Anos is just making excuses, since he can't overcome his armor, but his organs suddenly explode. Zepis wonders what happened, so Anos reveals that it was just the sound of his heartbeat, which continues to damage Zepis's organs until he falls to his knees. But he refuses to surrender, so Anos steps on him, but he mentions that he'll never give up. So Anos snaps his fingers and completely obliterates him, but he realizes he overdid it, so he brings him back to life, telling him to surrender. But he starts insulting Anos, who kills him again and immediately revives him, asking if he's ready to give up. Zepis refuses to give up since he's a noble, but Anos doesn't care, killing him hundreds of times as everyone watches in horror. Anos is ready to kill him again, but he finally surrenders, begging him to stop, so the fight ends, as we see a man annoyed at Anos for challenging the royalty. In the second phase of the exam, they evaluate their magical powers, and Misha gets an impressive score. Anos takes the test, but his score is 0, and the crystal ends up breaking, but Misha can tell it was destroyed by his overwhelming power. They move on to the aptitude test, where they answer a series of questions about the Demon King, but Anos thinks it's too easy. The day ends, and Anos sees Misha waiting for him outside. He invites her to celebrate at his house, and she decides to join him. So he takes her hand and uses teleportation magic, but she wonders why he knows how to use it, because it was lost during the mythical era. His mother praises him for passing the exams, and she can't believe he was able to do it even though he's only 1 month old. He introduces Misha, and his mother freaks out, but his father is proud of him, thinking he already has a girlfriend. Anos enjoys his meal, and his mother asks Misha what she likes about him, so she mentions that he's kind, saying he picked up her letter for her. His mother is happy that he found someone, and goes to make more food. Anos accompanies Misha home, and he asks about her father, but she reveals that the man who was at the academy is just her guardian, and she hasn't seen her parents since she was born. He mentions that it was a good day, and decides to call her his friend, which makes her happy. But there's suddenly magic that surrounds them, and an arena is suddenly created, as a man appears from the shadows, introducing himself as Leorg Indu, the brother of Zepis, who is also there to get revenge. But Leorg grabs him by the neck, telling him the family doesn't need weaklings, and electrocutes him until he dies. Leorg explains that they're the descendants of the Demon King, so they shouldn't be disrespected by half-breeds. But Anos mentions that lineage doesn't matter, and it's all about power. Leorg gets angry at him for belittling them, and calls his men to attack. He threatens to kill Anos, who thinks he should know his place, and Anos uses his powers to interfere with their magic, as they try to control their spells, but they end up exploding. Leorg wonders what he did, so he explains that he made their magic go berserk, saying they're no match for him. but Leorg refuses to lose to a hybrid, so he decides to cast a forbidden spell that can only be used by royalty. He unleashes his powers, and the place is taken over by his magic, but he realizes that Anos is unharmed. Anos recognizes it as origin magic, which involves borrowing the Demon King's power, but he explains it doesn't work on him since he's the source of the power. He realizes that Leorg is inexperienced, and he decides to give him a chance, so he resurrects Zeppis, but he turns into a zombie. He asks Leorg why he killed him, and he tries to stop him, but his attacks don't work, as Anos explains that zombies become stronger from the hatred of those who killed them. So he tells Leorg he must acknowledge his brother, and remember their moments together to stop the hatred. But he refuses to do it, and Zeppis is about to attack him, so he freaks out, as Anos tells him to call his brother's name. So he screams Zeppis's name, as he recalls the moments they spent together, but the field suddenly explodes, and they are both killed. Anos is disappointed that bonds in this era have become weak, but he uses his magic on them, and he protects Misha, as he erases the place from existence. He's disappointed with how weak his descendants have become, and they ask him who he is, so Anos reveals that he's the true Demon King of Tyranny. Back in the mythical era, Anos is confronted by the hero, but he explains that killing him won't end the war, because even if the demons are defeated, humans will find another enemy. But the hero wants to believe in humanity, so Anos offers to create a barrier between the dimensions, saying he will sacrifice his own magical energy. The hero asks him why he wants peace, so he repeats that demons aren't the problem, and he's also tired of the tragedy. The hero decides to trust him, so they begin the ritual, as the hero strikes his core, stabbing his heart, and he hopes that they can become friends in the next life. There's a huge beam of light, and everything is covered by his magic, as the barrier between the realms is created. After 2,000 years, Anos awakens, and he sees his new parents, who are about to name him, but he tells them to call him Anos, and they're amazed that he can already speak. On the first day at school, Misha reveals that Anos was the only one to fail the knowledge exam, and he wonders how that's possible. He asks her about the Demon King, but she isn't allowed to talk about him, so he decides to read her thoughts, and realizes that the Demon King's name was changed to Avos Delhevia, wondering how that could have happened. She explains how a student's aptitude is measured, saying it depends on how similar his mindset and emotions are to the Demon King. She's about to tell him about the student with the greatest aptitude, but she's interrupted as a girl walks past them. The teacher, Amelia, shows the spell they will be using for the next task, telling them they will be having a team duel. She asks them to choose the captains of each team, and the students start to volunteer, including Anos. But she explains that he isn't eligible, since he's a hybrid student, and he isn't part of the royalty, but he promises to prove that he's better than everyone. She threatens to expel him if he fails, but he approaches the circle of the spell, explaining that it's flawed. He makes a slight change in the magical flow, and the circle doubles its effectiveness, shocking everyone. So Amelia allows him to declare his candidacy, and he goes to sit down, as she tells the group leaders to introduce themselves. The girl from before stands up, introducing herself as Sasha Necron, as Misha reveals that she's her sister. But Anos wonders why she's a pure blood, while Misha is considered a hybrid, so she explains that it was a family decision. Amelia tells him it's his turn, so he introduces himself, and tells them that the Demon King they believe in is a fake. The students are divided into 4 groups, and Sasha is surrounded, because everyone wants to be on her team. She approaches Anos, thinking he has no chance since he only has one person on his team, calling Misha a doll without a soul. But he thinks she's ignorant, because she thinks dolls don't have souls, telling her she lacks the knowledge. She thinks he's rude, so she decides to use her Eye of Destruction to punish him. Everyone's terrified, but her power has no effect on him, because he has his own Eye of Destruction, and he tells her not to underestimate him. He admits that she has a good level of magic, and invites her to join her sister in his team, but she mentions that she never considered Misha as her sister. After class, Sasha talks to Anos, wanting to add conditions to their team duel battle. She promises to join his team if she loses, but if she wins, she wants him to become her slave. He accepts her conditions, knowing he can't lose, but she appears to be confident, and she walks away, as he realizes she still can't properly control her eyes. A week later, their teams face off in the forest, and they create a Zect pact to establish their bet. The match begins, and we learn the goal is to take down the enemy leader. Sasha's team builds their fort as Misha asks Anos about his plan, and he promises to surprise them. She quickly builds 3 castles with her spell, but Sasha thinks it's an illusion to buy time, and she decides to make the first move, but they suddenly see Anos approaching the castle. She's ready to punish him, but he tells her it won't work, as they wonder how he can hear them. He explains that their encryption spell is easy to break, but she tries to stay positive, thinking a single person can't pass through their defenses. But he grabs onto the castle, lifting up the entire structure, and he throws it into the sky. He tells them to try to land gently, and he starts playing with them as he throws them away. We see that the castle has been destroyed, and everyone's injured, but Sasha refuses to give up. She suggests performing the Geograze, which is considered the strongest level of fire magic. So they combine their power to summon the Geograze cannon, and they fire it with everything they have. Anos acknowledges that she's trying hard, but he fires a small flame, which pierces through their spell, causing it to disappear. The flame is about to reach them, so they try to use barriers to stop it, but it breaks through all of them and hits the castle, blowing everyone away. Sasha manages to stand up, and Anos appears before her as she wonders how he was able to cast a Geograze alone. But he reveals that he only used a Grega, which is considered as the weakest fire spell, but he won because he's just way stronger than them. He reminds her about their agreement, and she promises to get revenge, but she knows she can't break their pact, so she joins his team, thinking he did it just for Misha. But he mentions that there's another reason, saying her eyes are beautiful, since they radiate one of the most elegant forms of magic he has ever seen. They head to his house, where we see that his mother is proud of his victory. Sasha introduces herself, so his mother freaks out again, and his father thinks he's amazing for having 2 girlfriends. They eat together, and Sasha appears to be happy. After the meal, Anos accompanies the sisters home, and notices that they're closer now. They arrive at their house, and he's about to leave, but Sasha decides to talk to him, thanking him for helping her make up with Misha, and she mentions that he was the only one who ever challenged her. She asks a weird question, wondering what he would do if his fate was already sealed, but he explains it wouldn't matter, because he would just change his fate. She thinks he's amazing, and she kisses him, but she explains it was just as a friend. He tells her it was a good gift, so she blushes, and they call it a night. We see Sasha talking to Misha about Anos, and she remembers that Misha was always the only one brave enough to look into her eyes. She asks for forgiveness, knowing she wasn't a good sister to her, but she's not angry about it, and they're able to make peace with each other. At the academy, Anos discovers that Sasha is about to have her birthday tomorrow, and Misha thinks about what to buy for her. She sits at their table, reminding them they're on the same team, and she reveals that her former teammates also want to join them. But Anos reveals that he has already turned them down because he thinks they're useless, so she explains they need more members to participate in the other tests. The class begins, and Amelia mentions that the Demon King is predicted to reincarnate this year, so they will have a special class, and one of the 7 elders is going to teach them a spell. We learn that the 7 elders were created by the Demon King himself, and they were the first to inherit his blood. The elder named Ibis Necron appears, and Anos calls out to him, wondering if he remembers him. Amelia apologizes for Anos' behavior, but Ibis is curious, asking him if they know each other, as he reveals that he lost most of his memories from 2,000 years ago. Anos tries to force him to remember, shocking everyone, but he realizes something and releases him, as Ibis ignores what happened and proceeds to teach the spell. After class, Anos talks to Ibis, explaining that he restored his lost memories from 2,000 years ago. But it seems the past has been changed, and Ibis believes that the Demon King is Avos Delhavia. So Anos realizes that someone rewrote the past after his death and erased everyone's memories about him. Ibis still isn't sure if he's the true Demon King because he could be lying to steal his master's place, so he decides to remain neutral for the time being. Anos goes to talk to Misha, and he finds her looking at the letter from her guardian. He asks her why she hasn't opened it yet, so she explains that she prefers to keep it as a talisman. Sasha is with the other students, and they ask her why she's hanging out with Anos and Misha, calling them misfits. So she gets angry, using her eyes of destruction to split the ground, before walking away. In the next class, the teacher tells the students to collect magical tools inside the dungeon, telling them they will be able to keep the items for their team. They rush into the dungeon to complete the task, but Sasha wonders why Anos is taking his time. He thinks the best way to win is to acquire the scepter at the lowest level of the dungeon, but she explains that not even the teachers have reached that level, and she isn't sure if the scepter even exists. But he knows he'll find it, telling them they're about to enter his castle. They descend into the dungeon, realizing that the monsters have been defeated by the other students. Anos suggests that Misha use one of the items in the treasure room as a present for Sasha's birthday. He wonders if she also wants something, asking her about her birthday, so she reveals that it's the same as Sasha's, telling him they're actually twins. He tells them they have arrived, but they think it's a dead end, so he reveals that there's a secret passage. Sasha tries to use her magic to see through it, but she can't, as Anos explains that he has countermeasures in place, and he breaks the wall, revealing a hidden corridor. They arrive at a secret garden, as Anos reveals that it was used for activating natural magic circles, but he gets suspicious because it's different from 2,000 years ago. They finally find the door to the treasure room, and Misha notices that it has anti-magic protection, so even her strongest magic can't destroy it, but Anos uses brute force to open it. They enter the room, and the girls realize the scepter is real. Sasha is enchanted by it, as Anos takes Misha to another room, telling her to choose a present for Sasha, so she chooses the phoenix cloak, thinking it suits her. They return to Sasha, and Misha gives her the present, so she decides to try it on, telling Anos to leave so that she can get changed, and Misha thanks him for helping with the present. He waits outside the room, but a few moments later, he discovers that Sasha has killed Misha. She starts bragging and mentions that men always let their guard down after a kiss. But he thinks it's just an act, but she revokes their pact, and he's surprised she could break it, thinking it shouldn't be possible. He notices that Misha is still alive, so he's convinced that she's lying, but she laughs, saying Misha is just a doll born to be used by her. She casts a spell on Misha and threatens to end her life if he tries to capture her, but when she activates her flight spell, he manages to catch her, and Misha's wound disappears. She realizes it was just an illusion, and he reveals that he healed Misha as soon as he entered the room. He knows that her eyes of destruction activate when her emotions run high, but he noticed that her eyes didn't activate when Misha wished her a happy birthday, and it only lit up when she received the cloak. He asks her why her eyes didn't activate after betraying Misha, thinking she's too calm to be real. She activates her demonic eyes, and it starts destroying the room, but he ignores it, and he uses his powers to restrain her. Misha begs him to forgive her, so he lets her go, and Misha tries to help her, but she grabs the scepter and flies away. He ignores her and tells Misha to explain everything she's hiding, so she reveals that she isn't a magical doll and will actually disappear at midnight. She explains that she's a copy of Sasha, and he realizes that Sasha was able to break the Zect Pact because it was made with herself. Ivas created her from Sasha, using a spell that splits a person into two, but the magic has a time limit, so she only has 15 years to live before merging back with Sasha. Anos knows that the goal is to increase Sasha's natural magic, and Misha explains that everyone treated her like she never existed. But she's happy that he became her friend, thinking it was a miracle that he talked to her. He hugs her, calling her an idiot, and he tells her to live like she wants to continue existing. Meanwhile, Sasha is confused when the door to the room disappears, and Anos appears behind her, saying that Misha wants to make peace with her. Misha wonders if Sasha hates her, but she ignores her and proposes another challenge, saying she'll only answer her questions if he can use the magic circles she creates. He accepts the challenge, and Sasha draws 2 magic circles, explaining that she invented the spells, and she tells him he only needs to activate one of them. He knows that she wants him to use a spell that synchronizes the sources, realizing she intended to fail from the beginning, but he activates the circle, so she agrees to answer Misha's questions. She remembers the moments they spent together when they were children, and how Misha always stood by her side, while everyone feared her demonic eyes. But Misha was ignored by everyone and lived alone because she was just a copy, so Sasha researched spells to change her destiny. The spell begins to activate, and she reveals that they're about to switch destinies as she activates her second spell, which will turn Misha into the original body. But she knows that the only way to activate it is to have Misha reject her, so she tried to make Misha hate her, but she reveals that she actually loved her. Sasha is ready to accept her new destiny, and she activates her spell, but it doesn't work, as Misha tells her she'll never hate her. Sasha can't believe it, and she starts crying as she begs Misha to reject her because she doesn't want her to disappear. But Misha tells her it's okay, because she'll continue to stay by her side as a part of her. She's happy to finally reunite with her sister, telling Anos she has no regrets, because she experienced 2 miracles in her lifetime. But he tells her the real miracle hasn't happened yet, saying there's a solution to keep both of them alive. He thinks he only needs to change the past, telling them they used to be 2 different beings, so if they go back in time, when the fusion magic was activated, there will be 2 original sources instead of 1. So the spell will merge the 4 sources, and they will become true twins. He tells them they need to go back in time, but Sasha knows they aren't strong enough. So he gives them a portion of his powers, as he explains that they need to believe that he's the true demon king of tyranny. But Ivas suddenly breaks through the ceiling and stabs right through him, thinking he's preventing Sasha from becoming the perfect vessel for his master's awakening. But he tells Ivas that his master is already alive and pushes him back. Anos removes the blade and throws it back at Ivas, pinning him against the wall. He explains that he doesn't have time to play around, and he decides to activate his magic to send the girls back in time. But they're suddenly interrupted, as the guardian god of time appears, telling them he's there to punish them for disrupting the flow of time. He takes Ivas, and he rewinds time to heal him, before granting him the power of time. He comes back to life, as the god orders him to kill Anos, who casts a Geo Graze at him, but he stops it, saying he has become invincible. He manages to break Anos' barrier, stabbing him from behind, and the girls see him disappear, as Ivas brags about his new power. But Anos suddenly appears behind him, reminding him that he can't die. Ivas wonders how he's still alive, so he explains that he resurrected, but Ivas refuses to give up. He decides to stop time for eternity, as darkness covers the area, and Sasha and Misha are frozen, but it has no effect on Anos, who mentions that the spell is useless against him. Ivas can't believe it, and he charges in, trying to kill Anos, but he stops him with his barriers, forcing him to retreat, as he explains that he's the real demon king. He tells Misha and Sasha that he can destroy all the obstacles in their path, so they no longer need to worry about anything if they decide to follow him. The spell suddenly breaks, and they call his name, as they start to glow, because they now believe he's the true demon king of tyranny. They find their past selves, and the 4 sources finally merge, and the spell is completed. Anos reminds Ivas that they're in his castle, and he pulls out his sword of destruction. Ivas tries to escape, but Anos suddenly stabs him, and he realizes he can't heal himself. Anos tells the god not to challenge him again, and he continues to attack Ivas, and completely destroys his body. Everything returns to normal, and Anos calls Ivas back to life, explaining that his sword eliminated the demon and the god who took over his body. Ivas asks for forgiveness, and swears loyalty to him. Anos helps restore his memories, and tells him to watch the other elders, and find out who erased his memories. The girls also return to normal, and Anos tells them it's time to head back, saying there's still time to receive the highest grade for the exam. They leave the dungeon, and Misha is exhausted, but she's glad it's all over, and decides to finally read her letter. Sasha is happy that both of them are alive, and apologizes for everything she did. Anos gives Misha an enchanted ice ring, since it's also her birthday, and he invites them to have dinner at his house. We see Anos in the mythical era, as the Great Water Spirit challenges him. But his subordinate Shin volunteers to deal with it, and Anos promises to give him a reward if he defeats her with a single attack. He advances to face the spirit, and he manages to defeat it in 1 hit. So Anos praises him, asking him what he wants as a reward, but he asks for permission to reincarnate with him, because he just wants to keep serving him. Anos agrees, but explains that he'll lose all his memories and abilities, and they see the hero Kanan arriving. Anos reveals that even he has difficulty facing him, because he's the only one in the world with the magic of 7 sources. Back in the present, Sasha waits for the teacher to announce their score after retrieving the scepter, but instead, Emilia announces that a transfer student will join the class, revealing that he's a sword master. She also announces that the scepter Anos' team found has been stolen, and they didn't have time to evaluate its authenticity, so she'll only give them 70 points until the culprit has been found. Sasha revolts, but the other students think the scepter was fake anyway, since Anos is a hybrid. But a girl named Misa thinks it's unfair, saying hybrids and royalty deserve the same treatment, but Emilia tells her to sit down, threatening to expel her. Anos decides to resolve the situation, saying the thief is too obvious, and he pulls out the scepter from a student's chest and hands it to Emilia, knowing she allowed the student to steal it. After class, Misa thanks Anos for helping her, and she explains that the school is dominated by pure-blood nobility, while hybrids like them are marginalized. She tells him she's part of a guild that promotes activities to unify the demon race, and asks him if he wants to join them. She mentions that one of the 7 elders is supporting them, and they think Anos is the demon king of tyranny. They head to the guild tower, and we learn that it's filled with Anos' fangirls, who start freaking out as they see him. They look around the tower, and Sasha sees pictures of Anos, but Misa decides to show him something. They go to a room, where they see a sword, as Misa explains that she's the daughter of a noble demon and a water spirit. She never met her father, because he's a pure-blooded demon, while she's a hybrid, but he sent her the sword on her 10th birthday. She thinks he has the other half, and she hopes that one day, all demons will unite, so that she can finally meet him, asking Anos to join our group. The next day, we see the students in the arena, trying to pull their magic swords from the ground, but the swords drain their power, so they can't pull it out. 2 of the demon elders, Gaius and Yadol, teach the class, and they announce that only the students who pull out their swords can participate in the magic sword tournament. Sasha wonders why Anos hasn't pulled out a sword, thinking he can't do it, but he reveals that there's only one weapon he can't wield, and it's the holy sword that Conan used in the mythical era, and he makes one of the swords fly to him. One of the elders praises him and decides to challenge him, but they see another boy lifting a sword, and we learn that he's the transfer student. Yadol decides to face him, and immediately advances to attack, but the student easily knocks him out, as Anos takes out Gaius. They return to class, and the teacher is surprised that the transfer student doesn't want to be the leader of a group. He introduces himself as Ray, and he asks Anos if he can join his team. Emilia mentions that royalty can't take orders from a hybrid, but Ray ignores her, and he asks Anos again. But he refuses, because he wants Ray to show his determination first, and he asks Misa to join Ray's team, because he wants to fight them in the next group battle. On the day of the competition, Anos tells the girls to take care of the other team, while he fights against Ray. Misha creates a castle, and Sasha notices that her magic has improved. She thinks it's because of the ring, but Anos reveals that they both became stronger, because they merged with their past selves. He teleports to Ray, realizing he's waiting for him, but a giant golem suddenly appears, as Anos realizes that Ray is sharing his power with his team, so he decides to balance the fight by using a stick. Sasha is having trouble dealing with the golem, so Anos tells her to combine her powers with Misha and use Geo Graze, as Ray complains that he isn't focusing on their fight. Sasha wonders if their power will be enough, but Misha trusts Anos, and they prepare to use the spell as the Geo Graze cannon appears. They activate the spell, and Misha fires it, while Sasha boosts its speed, allowing them to blow up the golem. Sasha realizes they have become stronger, but Misa suddenly attacks her. Meanwhile, Ray appears to be reaching his limit, but he gets back up and continues his fight with Anos, who's impressed that he's starting to fight better. Sasha struggles against Misa, so she decides to use her Phoenix Cloak, but Misa is confident she can defeat her using Ray's sword. The golem is about to attack her, so Misha appears to help, and they decide to combine their powers, using their fire and ice magic to create a superior spell, which sweeps away both Misa and the golem. They're proud of themselves, but the ground suddenly starts shaking, and they realize that the battle between Anos and Ray is destroying everything around them. But Anos thinks it doesn't matter, because the forest will regenerate thanks to the natural mana, and Ray mentions that he's also too excited to stop. They continue to exchange blows, as Anos mentions that this is the first time he's had a real opponent since his reincarnation. Ray decides to end things, and he gets up above Anos to deliver the finishing blow, but Anos stops it with his stick, ending the fight, as he mentions that he's impressed, because Ray was able to keep up with him. Ray admits defeat, saying he feels like they've met before, and Anos thinks he looks familiar. He mentions that he's the demon king of tyranny, and Ray believes him, so Anos invites him to join his team. Anos returns home, and his mother is happy about his victory, but Misa thinks she isn't supposed to be there. But he reveals that he has accepted her into the team, telling her she has potential, as he mentions that her water magic is amazing, which makes her happy. After dinner, the girls talk with Anos' parents, and discover that he's only 1 month old. Rei talks to Misa and apologizes for not winning the battle, but she doesn't mind and is impressed that he isn't prejudiced against her, even though he's a royal. The next day, Emilia announces that Rei and Anos have been chosen to represent the class in the Magic Sword tournament, so they need to obtain a weapon before the event. After class, we see that Rei is excited for their rematch, but Anos thinks there's something suspicious about the royalty recruiting him for the tournament, because they clearly don't want him to win. But Misa interrupts them, revealing that the elder who favors hybrids wants to see him. Anos heads to the tower, and the elder Melhace gets emotional seeing him, saying he has waited 2,000 years for him to return. Anos wonders if he remembers him, so Melhace explains that part of his memories was erased by someone, but his source still remembers him. After Anos sacrificed himself, Melhace woke up in the spirit forest, and it took him 100 years to cross the barrier to the demon world. But by the time he returned, he discovered that someone changed his master's name to Avos Delhavia. Anos wonders who chose him for the tournament, and Melhace believes that the nobility did it because they want to defeat him so that they can prove that hybrids are inferior. Melhace advises him to drop out of the tournament, thinking Avos might reveal himself if Anos doesn't take their bait, and he promises to think about it. Anos goes home, and Misha reveals that she helped his mother prepare dinner. They enjoy the meal and talk about the tournament as he remembers that he still needs a magic sword. After the meal, he offers to take Misha on a date as a way to thank her for the meal, telling her to choose the place she wants to go. They walk around the city, and they head to a magic model shop, where Anos notices the model houses, realizing that her hobby is creating them. They go to another room, where she uses her magic to create a model of them having dinner, planning to give it to Sasha. Anos decides to give it a try, creating a model of the entire kingdom, and the shop owner is impressed, thinking it's a masterpiece. So she offers her entire shop to buy it from him, but he explains that he has no desire to sell it. After that, Anos realizes that Misha keeps admiring his model, so he transforms it into a ring and gives it to her, saying she'll always be able to see it. She thanks him, and they see a cat cafe, so they decide to check it out. A strange cat appears before them, and it starts talking to them, as Misha realizes it's Ivis. He reports to Anos, saying Misa's unification group is being controlled by someone, but the group has no idea who he is. He mentions that there's a mysterious person working in a hospital, but he isn't sure if he's connected to Misa's group, so Anos tells him to keep an eye on Melhace in the Magic Sword tournament. They go to check the hospital Ivis mentioned, and Anos notes that it doesn't look suspicious. But Rei suddenly appears, and Anos asks him why he's there, so he tells them he came to visit his mother. Anos offers to heal her, since he can cure any disease with his powers, but Rei doesn't pay much attention, and he enters the hospital, as they realize he's acting strange. The day of the tournament arrives, and Ivis tells Anos that the two elders behind the event intend to lure him into a trap. So he considers dropping out, thinking it could make Avos Delhavia appear. The owl announces the start of the tournament, as Anos' opponent appears, but everyone realizes that he hasn't shown up, so they think he gave up. We see that he's waiting for Avos Delhavia to appear, as everyone starts trash-talking him, but his mother suddenly starts yelling at them, telling them he will become the Demon King. His father appears in the tunnel, revealing that he made a magic sword for him, and mentions that his victory will prove that even a hybrid can become the Demon King. So Anos takes the sword, and thanks his father, realizing he has no reason to be cautious. He wants to make his parents happy, so he decides to fight and face any trap that appears. He jumps into the arena, and he apologizes for wasting his opponent's time, promising to finish the fight in 1 minute. His opponent charges in, but he easily avoids the attacks, as his fans sing a song in his honor. So his opponent gets angry and decides to use his secret technique, but it doesn't work. Anos decides to attack, thrusting his sword to create wind, which strikes his opponent and destroys his sword. Anos is declared as the winner, as he mentions that he was able to win in exactly 1 minute, but Emilia is furious because he defeated her brother. We see Anos and Misa in the waiting room, where they watch Rei as he wins his duel, and he joins them, but he announces that he's now a part of the royal faction, and he suddenly attacks Anos, who grabs onto his heart. We see they were just testing each other, and they look forward to their fight in the finals. Anos notices the presence of a magical collar on Rei, which is designed to destroy his source, so Anos thinks he has been taken as a hostage. The day ends, and everyone congratulates Anos on his victory. His mother offers to keep his sword for him, thinking he must be tired, and she knows he can't lose it or he'll be disqualified from the tournament. He hands it to her, and she's surprised by its weight, but promises to protect it with the help of the girls. Anos goes to the hospital with Misa, and they find Rei's mother. He realizes that her magic is getting weaker, and discovers that she's suffering from a spiritual disease he has never heard of. He knows she's going to disappear, realizing she's a half-spirit and half-demon like Misa, who thinks it's impossible because they know that Rei is from royalty. Anos thinks she might be his foster mother, wondering how to cure her, but she suddenly wakes up, and she recognizes Anos. She explains that Rei always talks about him and calls him a friend, but he asks her if she knows that Rei made a pact, so she explains that he did it in exchange for her treatment. Anos asks about her disease, so she explains that a spirit exists thanks to the feelings of everyone who believes in their source. But half-spirits are susceptible to disappearing because their source is weaker. She starts talking about Rei, saying he's a good boy who loves holding a sword, but he was always sad because he couldn't find a real opponent. She reveals that he was happy when he lost to Anos, and she asks him to fight Rei in the tournament so that he can use his full strength and stop worrying about her. But Anos thinks there's another way, and he creates a new spell, telling Misa to use her source to fuel the spiritual power of Rei's mother. But he warns her that they could both get wiped out, saying he can't resurrect her if her source is depleted, but she agrees to do it because she believes in him. The spell begins, and her source flows into Rei's mother, but he notices something, and we see his mother with the girls as they walk back home, but Emilia suddenly appears. She explains that the governing committee is supposed to keep Anos' sword until the finals, but his mother thinks it's better to deliver it to the committee personally. So Emilia tries to take it by force, but she refuses to hand it over, so Emilia casts a spell on her, and she ends up getting injured. Emilia continues to attack, so the girls protect her with a barrier, but Emilia manages to overpower them, knocking them down. Anos' mother reminds her that she's attacking her own students, but she thinks hybrids don't have the right to go to her class. She mentions that Anos humiliated her brother in the tournament, so she wants to get revenge. She fires a powerful energy beam, but the girls get back up and protect Anos' mother, telling her to escape, so she starts running away. Emilia manages to break through their barrier, but they refuse to give up, knowing they're fighting for Anos, so she blasts them with her magic. Anos' mother sees the charred remains of the girls, so she becomes desperate as Emilia prepares to finish her off. But Anos suddenly appears, protecting her from the attack. Emilia starts bragging, but he restrains her, and he heals his mother and revives the girls, thanking them for what they did. He approaches Emilia, promising not to show mercy, and he takes her to the arena, stabbing her with a sword, but he promises to spare her if she recognizes him as the true Demon King. He starts torturing her, and she calls him the Demon King, but he thinks she doesn't mean it, so he decides to kill her. But he casts a spell to resurrect her in a new body, telling her that she's now a hybrid, so she loses it, and tries to take her own life. But he reveals he placed a curse on her so that she can't, and he condemns her to live as a hybrid forever, and he teleports away. Meanwhile, Misa is busy with the spell when Rei suddenly finds her, asking her what she's doing. He realizes she's sharing her powers with his mother in an attempt to save her, so he lowers his knife, but he mentions that she's losing too much of her own source. He tries to convince her to stop, but she refuses to let go, so he knocks her out and sets her down when he realizes his mother is conscious. She tells him not to worry about her, explaining that she had a good life thanks to him. She remembers when she found him on the streets, and she's glad to have been his mother. Anos appears, and he sees Misa lying down, so he looks outside, and he sees Rei leaving the hospital. The next day, the owl mentions that the finals is about to begin, and Rei and Anos finally prepare to have a real duel. But before the fight begins, they implement new rules, and Anos and Rei wear spiritual draining bracelets, as the owl explains that the user loses if it's broken. The duel begins, and they start fighting, as Rei compliments Anos for fighting with the bracelet, revealing that the one he's wearing is just for show. But he doesn't want to win like this, so he breaks his pact, and the magical collar pierces his source. He explains he has violated his contract with the royalty, so he's going to die, and he knows he can't heal his mother, so he decides to die fighting Anos with everything he has. Anos is ready for the duel, telling him to focus on the battle, and they start fighting, as the others notice that they're moving too fast. When Rei dodges Anos' attacks, he manages to hit him in the arm, before jumping away, and continuing with a barrage of attacks, as they both get injured. They advance against each other, when Anos cuts Rei, telling him the fight is over. They move forward for the final attack, and Anos loses his arm, but he manages to stab Rei, who thanks him for the fight. A magic circle is activated, and Anos appears in another dimension, where he finally sees the person responsible for the tournament. The bird transforms into Melhace, who reveals that he was waiting for the right moment, and is happy that he can finally get rid of him. He mentions that half of Anos' magical powers were drained by the bracelet, so he thinks killing him will be easy. He calls the other two emperors to help, thinking Anos has no chance, but he mentions that they just gave themselves away, as Rei cuts the elders, and Anos freezes time. Melhace wonders how Rei is still alive, so he explains that Anos saved him by destroying the spell with his final blow. But Melhace thinks nothing has changed, showing that he has Rei's mother trapped with his spell. He decides to bargain, saying he will heal her if Rei swears loyalty to the nobility, but Anos distracts him, as Rei throws his sword, and jumps into the portal. Melhace refuses to lose, and creates new portals that release a mist, which is similar to what Anos used to separate the four realms in the mythical era. He attacks with it, and destroys Anos' shield, explaining that he stored part of the wall to use as his own power. He thinks Anos is still too weak to fight back, since he only has a tenth of his power after reincarnating, but Anos uses his arm, forcing Melhace to retreat. The mist continues to attack Anos, as Melhace hides in an impenetrable space, and he summons a portal to attack Rei, but Anos uses an anti-magic barrier to protect him. He tells Rei that he used too much magical power, and asks for his help, but he explains that he needs a sword, so Anos creates one using his magic. Rei is ready to clear the way using the sword, trying to cut the mist, but his sword ends up breaking, so Anos protects him again. He thinks he doesn't stand a chance, but his mother starts talking to him, offering her power to help him. She mentions that she'll always be by his side, and she transforms into a magic sword, which he uses to cut everything in his path. He reaches the gate, and he launches a powerful attack to destroy all the darkness in it. The attack helps Anos, and even invades Melhace's dimension. His mother transforms back, and declares that she's proud of how strong he has become, before disappearing into the air. So he starts crying, but Anos tells him to save his tears for later, as Melhace curses them, and starts recreating his dimension with the remaining mist, but Anos suddenly appears behind him. He realizes that Anos followed the trace of the spiritual sword, but quickly traps him with the mist, thinking he has won. But Anos comes out unscathed, so Melhace tries to attack him again, but he dissipates the mist, leaving Melhace in shock. He wonders how Anos is surviving his attacks, and Anos summons his sword, revealing that he finally recovered all of his powers thanks to coming in contact with the mist. Anos attacks with his sword, so Melhace tries to escape, but he gets cut even after dodging it, as Anos explains that his sword can destroy all laws. Melhace becomes desperate and summons countless portals to attack, but Anos shatters them instantly. He stabs Melhace with his sword, killing the creature inside him. So he returns to normal and recovers his memories. They return to the arena, and Melhace tells Anos that he was being controlled by an unknown entity, which attacked him after they met at the tower. Anos summons Gaius and Yadol, and he notices that their minds are also being controlled by Avos Delhavia. So he decides to revive them, but their sources are suddenly attacked, and they see a masked man in the darkness. Anos notices that he wasn't affected by his spell, as the man leaves, and everyone starts to return to normal, wondering what just happened. But they see Rei lying on the ground, and Anos is declared as the winner of the tournament. Everyone congratulates him, but he shouts that it was all thanks to his sword, saying his father is the supreme craftsman. The event comes to an end, and he heals Rei, who is still sad for his mother. But Anos brings her back to life, and Rei reunites with her, wondering how he was able to do it. So he explains that after discovering she was a sword spirit, he managed to spread rumors with his magic, and people started believing in her source again. Sasha appears representing her family, to present him as the tournament winner, telling him his sword should be blessed, and gives him a kiss. Back in the mythical era, we see Anos crossing several barriers, as the hero Kanan wonders why he's there. He explains that he came to talk, asking Kanan if he doesn't want to stop the war. But the commander Jurga suddenly attacks, and he tells Kanan not to listen to Anos, thinking he would never want peace. He draws power from his troops to become stronger, wanting to avenge his family that was killed by demons. But Anos easily pierces his chest, telling Kanan to come to his castle as he teleports away. Kanan checks on Jurga before running to get help, and his necklace falls, but Jurga vows to get revenge on Anos in the next life. The class meets their new teacher Menno, after Amelia suddenly disappeared. She announces that in 3 weeks, they will travel to the human realm for an exchange class with the Hero Academy. The students wonder if it's safe to visit the academy, as she gives them the rest of the details. She explains that there will be a competition using a traditional human army magic, which allows the troops to offer their power to the leader, and Anos decides to train his friends to face the competition. Anos doesn't go easy on them, but Misha creates an ice sword for Ray, helping him in the battle, but Anos easily breaks it and smashes him into the ground. They continue training, and Melhace later tells Anos that Gaius and Yadol have finally been resurrected, but it seems their memories were also stolen 2,000 years ago. He doesn't trust the human realm, and asks Anos to be careful on the exchange trip. Anos takes Ray to his arsenal, where he chooses a sword that belonged to Shin, as he suspects that Ray might be his incarnation. A few days later, the owl announces that they need to arrive in the human capital within 10 days, so that they can participate in the competition, but Anos immediately teleports them, as the others mention that he takes all the excitement out of the trip. He decides to explore the city, and calls Sasha to go with him. They enter the city, and Anos notices that the humans are at peace. They arrive at the Hero Academy, but a girl appears, asking them who they are, and she realizes that they're from the Demon King Academy, so she introduces herself as Eleanor, a third-year senior. She mentions that they arrived early, but Anos cuts her off, and reveals that he's interested in the legend of the hero, so she gets excited, and decides to show them the school. She gives them a tour, and they find a painting of Kanan. They go to the library, where she shows the book about the hero's legend, and how he defeated the Demon King of Tyranny. But Sasha gets furious hearing this, saying the Demon King never lost to anyone, and he was the one who sacrificed himself to bring peace to the realms. But Anos calms her down, thinking it's normal for the humans to tell the story like this. He asks for the name of the Demon King, and Eleanor tells him it's Avos Delhevia, so he realizes they also don't know the truth. He asks about Kanan's reincarnation, but she reveals that there are 4 reincarnated heroes, because he had 7 sources, so they incarnated into different bodies. A student suddenly appears, and mentions that the Demon King couldn't have sacrificed himself to create peace for the realms, thinking they should just accept defeat. He introduces himself as Led, the first to reincarnate as the hero Kanan, and another student named Lias joins them, revealing he inherited Kanan's 3rd source. But Anos doesn't think they're true incarnations, so Lias thinks he's challenging them, so he rushes at Anos with his special technique. But Anos defeats him in the blink of an eye, so he becomes furious, but Led tells him to calm down, and apologizes for his rudeness. After that, Eleanor admits that she's impressed, and asks if Anos has been reincarnated, so he confirms it, saying he wants to find the true hero. But before he leaves, she tells him that Kanan no longer exists, and even if his source returns, he'll no longer be the hero Anos remembers, revealing that he was killed by a human 2,000 years ago. 10 days later, the other students finally arrive in the city, and they're surprised to find out that Anos has already been there. A group of seniors confronts Anos, as the leader introduces himself as Rivist, thinking Anos used a cheat to get there, and he mentions that he'll never recognize him as the Demon King. The first day of the exchange begins, and a man named Diego introduces himself as the director of the Hero Academy. For the first class, he shows the students how to recreate objects, and he wants them to demonstrate their magic as a test. He chooses Led to represent the humans, while Menno chooses Rivist. Led displays his heroic magic by strengthening a rusty sword, and he uses it to destroy a statue, leaving everyone impressed. Rivist chooses to show a monster transformation spell, but his spell fails, so he tries again, but something goes wrong, and Led thinks the Demon King's Academy is pathetic, but Anos mentions that the test is rigged, knowing the humans cast a spell that seals demonic magic. He destroys the spell, and the rat immediately transforms into a monster. So everyone's frightened, but he makes the monster disappear, as he creates a sacred sword before their eyes. Diego can't believe that he can use sacred magic, but he explains that it isn't too different from demonic magic. Led realizes that he's truly the reincarnation of the demon king of tyranny, but Rivest refuses to believe it. At night, Ivas tells Anos that the books don't reveal the death of the hero Conan, but the humans believe that the demon king will attack their world again, and the hero will appear wielding his sacred sword. Anos realizes that the human realm is ready for war, and he thinks about the hero's sword that can defeat him. But they're interrupted by Sasha and Misha, and they invite him to go to the city festival, where they see Ray together with Misa, and he gives her a shell necklace. The next day, the girls are curious about the necklace, when Anos reveals that there's a story about it. He mentions that 2,000 years ago, a couple split a shell in half, to ensure that they found each other after they were reincarnated. They arrive at the beach, where the students gather for the competition, but Anos notices that Eleanor is missing. Diego reveals they will be competing in an underwater fight, telling them not to lose too quickly, because he's sending his elite class. The seniors ask Menno to choose them to represent the demons, and Anos offers to fight, but Rivest insists on being the ones to compete, because they want to prove the value of the nobility. Menno agrees with him, and tells him to lead the team to victory. The exam begins, as Menno explains that Rivest is actually a kind person who admires the demon king. The students discover that they can't sense the enemy's powers when they're suddenly ambushed by the humans, and a student notices that their spells are being cancelled. The heroes laugh at them, and Led commands his team to attack the demon king's castle. Sasha notices that something's wrong, and Anos discovers what it is. He shows Menno that the humans mixed sacred water into the lake, and it increases their magical powers, while weakening the demons. An upperclassman informs Rivest that the heroes are approaching the castle, so he decides to activate his spells, releasing a dark energy cannon, but the heroes use their shields, and come out unscathed. They activate a combined spell, which completely destroys the castle, and one of them summons his sacred sword, and he uses it to defeat the demons. Menno gets angry, and tells Diego to end the exam, but he refuses, so Anos decides to intervene, and he uses his magic to rescue his seniors from the water. They were all wounded by the sacred sword, so Menno tries to heal them, but it has no effect on this type of wound, and Diego tries to explain that it's not his fault. Anos explains that he can heal the wound, but Rivest pushes him away because he doesn't want his help. But Anos explains that Menno will be fired if a noble dies, and Rivest admits that he's weak, saying he admires Anos' strength, and he begs him to help defeat the Hero Academy. Anos manages to heal his wounds, and he promises to handle the rest. He gathers his team and challenges the heroes to a second round, and they accept, thinking the demons still haven't figured out their trick. But Anos suddenly casts his Geo Graze on the lake, drying up all the water in it, and Diego can't believe it, but the heroes still decide to continue. They follow him to the dry lake, and Led assures Diego they will still win, because they still have a secret weapon. The duel begins, and Anos summons another Geo Graze against the three heroes, but they aren't intimidated, and create a barrier that protects them from the attack, as a girl suddenly appears and destroys it. He thinks she's another reincarnation of Conan, realizing she's stronger than the others. They see the barrier, as Anos explains that it strengthens the humans and weakens the demons, so they need to get rid of it. Misha suggests creating a castle within the barrier to nullify the effects, and he thinks it's a great idea, so he decides to take her inside. She starts creating the castle, when the heroes appear with the mysterious girl. Anos asks for her name, and Led introduces her as Zeshia, the bearer of the fourth source and the light sword. They attack Anos, but he emits his energy, knocking them down immediately. Laius gets up frustrated, but Sasha confronts him, and announces that she'll be his new opponent, while the hero with the sacred sword faces Ray. Laius uses his power to blast Sasha, but she advances against him, and he manages to dodge her attack, but he realizes she has stolen his sacred amulet. So he charges at her, and summons his sword to recover it, forcing her to retreat, while he grabs the amulet. He launches a barrage of attacks, when Sasha realizes she can't move, because she's caught inside a magical barrier. Laius prepares to deliver the finishing blow, but he suddenly collapses, and falls to the ground. He realizes that she poisoned his amulet, and she uses her eyes to destroy the barrier. She tells him she's going to punish him for messing with Anos, and she starts using her powers to torture him. Meanwhile, the third reincarnation of Conan introduces himself as Hein, and we see that Ray has fallen into his barrier. He summons his swords, but his arm is suddenly cut off, so he wonders how Rei managed to attack him from inside the barrier, but he restores his arm and declares that he's still stronger. Rei is impressed with the sword Anos gave him, but he decides to take one of Hein's swords, stabbing it into the ground, which causes a shockwave that throws Hein away, as Rei grabs his other sword. He becomes desperate, wondering how Rei can hold a sacred sword, but Rei approaches him and ends the battle. We see Anos standing over Led's body, but tells him to stop pretending that he's dead. So he gets up, realizing Anos was able to see through his act, and he summons his guardian sword of the sea for the battle. Zeshia suddenly attacks Anos from behind, but he blocks her attack. She continues swinging rapidly, trying to find an opening, and he throws her to the ground, but Led suddenly attacks from behind, but Anos throws Zeshia at him. Led decides to cast the human's secret spell, covering the entire area, and light surrounds them, as he explains that the hearts of 10 million humans living in the capital is being channeled to them. Zeshia charges at Anos, and immediately destroys his barrier, but he dodges her attack, as Led uses the opportunity to charge in. They don't allow him to recover, and they attack him together, but this time they can't break his barrier. Led realizes he's more powerful now, and he reveals that he copied Led's idea, and also asked for power from his team. The heroes attack again, but Anos' fans sing for him, giving him more energy, and he easily blows them away. Led attacks with an energy blast, but Anos easily overpowers him, which throws them against the wall. Led can't believe that their power of 10 million is losing to only 8, but Anos tells him it's not about the number, but the strength of the feelings, telling them that their power doesn't even compare to what Kanan had 2,000 years ago. Everyone suddenly hears a mysterious voice, and realizes it's actually a brainwashing spell. Misha tells Anos that it's a voice of pure hatred, but now the heroes are even more determined to eliminate him. He tells Misha to retreat, and Led goes completely insane, as Zeshia flies towards Anos, and activates a kamikaze spell, which causes a massive explosion. But Anos comes out unscathed, and Led can't believe it. Zeshia attacks again, and activates another spell, but this time it's just a distraction, and he grabs her source, realizing she's in an infinite loop. But he hears Eleanor's voice, and she calls him to meet her inside the sanctuary, because only she can stop Zeshia. So he decides to keep her occupied, and orders Misha to find Eleanor, so she goes to the temple. But she's hit by a spell, and realizes that Diego is attacking her. He summons his sword, as he curses the demons, and he opens a mysterious door, which breaks her shield. He stabs her multiple times, and he reveals that the exchange class was a trap from the beginning. He prepares to destroy her source, but Anos appears to save her. He heals her, and decides to deal with Diego, torturing him with his eyes, until he completely disappears. But he's resurrected, and Anos realizes he's responsible for controlling everyone, asking him why he planned all of this. But he calls Anos a filthy demon, so he uses a transformation spell to reveal Diego's true nature, turning him into a beast. He controls his students and orders them to attack the demons immediately, declaring that he'll honor the hero Kanan, but his spell fails, and he wonders what happened. Anos explains that he stopped time before it was too late, and he removes Diego's source from his body, thinking the Hero Academy is nothing like Kanan, remembering all the battles they fought. He begs Anos to kill him, so he crushes his source, erasing him from existence. He carries Misha to the sanctuary, where he finds Eleanor, and he asks her who she really is. So she reveals that she's magic itself, saying she was created with a forbidden spell that changes humans into magic. Anos realizes that she's responsible for the barrier and for healing the heroes after they were defeated. She was using her power to create clones of Zeshia, which explains why she kept coming back. He breaks the glass with his demonic eyes to free her, and he gives her a uniform. She lifts her barrier, and she reveals that everything was planned by Jurga, the commander who hated demons. He feared that humans would forget their hatred for demons, so he created the Hero Academy to keep the resentment alive, and transformed his source into 2 spells. The first is the spell that allows the sharing of power, and she's the second one, but she's considered as a failure, because she didn't inherit the hatred for demons that Jurga had. She reveals that 2,000 years ago, Kanan went against his war plans, so he was betrayed, and killed by his own men. Eleanor confesses that she was waiting to meet Anos, telling him to destroy her, because she wants to put an end to Jurga's madness. A clone of Diego interrupts them as she explains that he and the heroes will keep coming back unless she's destroyed. He prepares to fight, but at that moment, the other 3 demon emperors invade the room with Kanan's sacred sword, along with Ava's Delhavia. He pulls out the sword, and Diego tries to stop them with an energy blast, but Avos creates a black hole to absorb all the energy, and it swallows the humans. Anos still stands before them, as Avos declares that he's the true demon king of tyranny, so Anos attacks him, but he easily cuts it, and teleports away. After that, we see Diego talking to everyone in the city, and he announces that the demon king of tyranny has awakened, and has declared war on them just like in the legends. At the same time, the ancient emperors appear in the demon realm, and they declare that the demon king has returned. Avos appears, saying they need to exterminate the humans, and everyone's happy that the demon king has finally returned. In the tower, Anos meets with the demon emperors loyal to him, and they warn him that the demon armies are already marching to the borders. The elders swear to follow him, and his friends appear, telling him they're going to fight for him. Everyone's ready for battle, so Anos tells them they will leave at dawn. Misa talks to Rei, worried that one of them might not return, so Rei takes half of his necklace and promises to come back for her. The next day, Anos instructs his team for the war, while Diego gathers his army, and the Shadow Knights march to battle. But Sasha and Misha appear before them, ready to stop their advance, as Rei easily defeats the enemies in the forest. Avos is inside a castle, and Anos tells the elders to take care of the other emperors while he faces Avos, and he teleports to the castle. Misa calls him telepathically and reveals that Rei disappeared, while Melaes also tells him that the 3 elders were captured, but they were just shells, because their source isn't inside them. Anos realizes that Avos isn't in the castle, and we see him walking to the border, but a barrier suddenly surrounds him, and Anos appears before him. Avos summons Kanan's sacred sword, and they charge at each other, causing a huge blast from the impact. Anos realizes that he's actually Kanan, because he's the only one that can wield the sword. But Anos sees his necklace, and Avos removes his mask, revealing that he's actually Rei. He wonders how Anos discovered his secret, so he reveals that he heard him mention that the shell necklace he bought was unique, but he shouldn't have knowledge of the human customs, so it's proof that he remembers his past. We learn that Kanan used his 7 sources to control the ancient emperors, and only Melaes wasn't controlled, because he needed to keep at least one source. He decides to tell Anos everything that happened 2,000 years ago, saying that the humans are weak. He knows that they betrayed him to plan the death of the Demon King after his reincarnation, and he thinks their actions make no sense, so he decided to change fate with the power of his sacred sword. He knew that they wouldn't stop until Jurga's revenge was fulfilled, and someday Anos would need to wipe them out to achieve peace. So he took Anos' place, planning to be defeated by the humans to end the curse of Jurga's hatred. Anos talks about the shell necklace, saying that he has someone waiting for him, asking him if he's ready to abandon her. But Rei is determined to fulfill his plan and protect the realm, so he runs towards Anos, but he flies up and launches fireballs at Rei. But he cuts them and tries to get closer, but he ends up getting hit and falls back down, causing one of his sources to be destroyed. But Rei flies towards Anos again, but he gets stabbed and loses another source. But Rei forces him back, and Anos summons a black sea that engulfs him, and he loses another source. But he continues fighting and manages to strike Anos. But he uses his Geo Graze to burn Rei, destroying the 4th and 5th sources. Rei cuts through the spell, but Anos pierces his body and destroys his 6th source, causing him to fall to the ground. Anos explains that he'll lose, but he gets back up, saying he only needs to win once. He summons another sacred sword and charges at Anos with a flurry of attacks, saying he needs to achieve peace. Anos launches a huge Geo Graze at him, but he doesn't stop and cuts his way to Anos, finally stabbing his heart. His source is destroyed, but he smiles at Rei, and he lowers the barrier as he wears Avos Delhavia's mask. When the others see the fight, everyone realizes that the hero reincarnated and was able to kill the Demon King of Tyranny. Anos tells Rei to look heroic, thinking it will be enough to dissipate the hatred, and he orders his army to withdraw, telling them not to seek revenge until he reincarnates again. Rei is grateful to him, and he pulls out his sword, seeing him fall towards the ground. He declares his victory, saying the war is over, and the demon commander orders his army to retreat. But Diego can't accept that it all ends like this, so he orders his army to eliminate all the demons. He summons an army of Zeshias, but Eleanor appears before them and begs him to stop the war. But he's taken by Jurga's will and explains that the humans must destroy every demon to achieve true peace. He refuses to let a 2,000-year-old hatred end like this, and uses the spell that Jurga created to hypnotize the army to continue the war. Jurga appears before their eyes, and Ray tries to destroy him, but the sacred sword has no effect on him. Sasha and Misha appear to stop him, and Idas casts his fusion spell, as they hold hands, and the spell merges their two sources into one body. Jurga tries to stop her, but she continues advancing, so he orders the Zeshias to self-destruct, but Ray knocks them down. Misa creates a bubble, and he disperses her magic to stop the other clones. The girls delay the spell, but Jurga is too strong, and he gathers the clone army, causing a huge explosion as a light spreads across the realm. But the clones fall to the ground at the last minute, and Anos appears to help them as Jurga wonders how he reincarnated after his source was destroyed. So he reveals that he activated a source magic and channeled the power of the hero's attack, transforming it into ancient magic to revive his source, but he explains that he can only do it with an attack he has already received. Jurga decides to eliminate him with his own hands, and uses his spell to drain the life of everyone in the realm, transforming himself into a giant sacred knight. He attacks Anos, but Ray interferes, and Anos tells him they can finally put an end to the curse. Ray charges in, but is caught by an energy attack, and thrown into the forest. Anos tries to immobilize Jurga with his chains, and he starts burning him, but Jurga attacks Anos, sending him crashing to the ground. He appears to be wounded, but he uses Jurga's spell and asks for the girls' help again, so they join forces and share their energy. Jurga summons hundreds of sacred swords and launches them at the demon army, but Eleanor protects them with her barrier and tells them to retreat. But they start to believe in Anos, and they also share their power with him. Jurga tries to cast another spell, but he's electrocuted by Anos, who mentions that the two realms are now helping each other, so they don't need to go to war, but Jurga refuses to accept it, and Ray cuts his legs. Anos summons his castle, and summons his demonic sword. He joins Ray to deliver the finishing blow, which erases Jurga from existence, and there's an explosion of energy in the sky. Sasha and Misha run to Anos, and Ray finds Misa. Anos appears before Eleanor, and he uses a spell to transform her into his magic so that no one can misuse her. The world returns to peace, and everyone accepts Anos as the true demon king. He returns home, and his mother is happy that he's safe, but she notices that he brought another girl home. Sasha also mentions the 10,000 Zeshias, so they freak out, thinking he has too much riz. In a flashback to the mythical era, we see the Aharthran spirit forest, where the great spirit Leno announces that she's going to Delskade. The lesser spirits are worried, so she tries to calm them down, but a flash of light takes over as the Heavenly Father Nisgalia appears, telling her she has been chosen as the mother of his next child. She refuses, but he explains that she can't say no to a god, and she attacks him, but he uses his power to trap her. He tries to impregnate her against her will, but Anos appears and stops him with his geograze, piercing his heart. Nisgalia mentions that he will kill Anos as well, but his throat is cut as Shin appears. Anos declares that he will eliminate the laws of the gods, and he destroys Nisgalia's body. He asks Leno if she has made up her mind, and she tells him she has decided to trust him. So he tells Shin to look after her until she reaches Delskade, because Nisgalia might return to attack her, but she doesn't like the idea. The two are left alone, and Leno explains that she doesn't need a bodyguard. So Shin prepares to take his own life, saying he would rather die than disobey an order from Anos, and she finally agrees to go with him. They set off for Delskade, and Shin takes care of Leno along the way as she starts to enjoy his company. Anos meets with Kanan, telling him about his plan, and they perform the ritual to separate the four realms. Leno and Shin return to the spirit forest, but they realize that the place has been destroyed, and the spirits appear, telling Leno they're being devoured. Divine beasts appear, so Shin gets rid of them, but she senses a hidden presence, so she demands that it reveal itself. But she realizes it's just a child, and he introduces himself as Anash Poltikol. Back in the present, Anos walks to the academy and greets the girls in his fan club when Sasha and Misha appear. He stares at Sasha, noticing that she has a new ribbon, so she blushes. Misa and Ray join them, but everyone notices them together and starts teasing them, so Misa explains that it's not what it looks like. In class, the students still don't know that Anos is the demon king of tyranny, so they think the true demon king will make him regret mocking the nobility. Their professor Menno introduces Eleanor as a new transfer student, and we see that Zeshia is with her. The students don't like them because they're from the Hero Academy, but Menno explains that Diego was the only one who planned the conflict, so they shouldn't hold a grudge against humans. Eleanor and Zeshia sit next to Anos, and Menno introduces everyone to their new teacher Erdeme. The students think he's a hybrid because they've never heard of him, but she explains that he was born before the 7 demon elders and is one of the 4 evil kings who ruled during the mythical era. He decides to start his lesson and reveals that Avos Delhavia isn't the demon king, so the students accuse him of insolence. But he mentions that the name was just a lie to deceive humans, saying Anos is the true demon king of tyranny. He shows a Zect pact made by the 7 elders as proof, and he makes everyone kneel before Anos. But he returns them to their seats, thinking they don't need a king because the world is at peace. Before returning to his seat, he asks Erdeme why he's using such a poor disguise, knowing he's actually Nisgalia. He explains that he has something to say, so Anos decides to listen. He begins to educate the class, saying the world has an order that dictates the rules of everything that happens, and the entities that are part of the order are seen as gods. We learn that 2,000 years ago, the goddess of destruction Abinu was bringing devastation to the world, so the demon king of tyranny fought her and changed her name. Erdeme reveals that the goddess's body became the Delskate castle, and her power became the sword of destruction. But it disrupted the order of the world, so the gods decided to eliminate the demon king. The students think the story isn't real, so Nisgalia reveals his true form as the father of the gods and places collars on them. He mentions that a new order will be born to destroy Anos, and it's already at the academy. So Anos thanks him for the warning, but he threatens him, telling him to release the students. Nisgalia thinks he can't do anything, because killing him will cause the world to collapse, but Anos stabs him anyway, killing him in front of the entire class. Anos quickly resurrects him, but he realizes that something's wrong, and Anos explains that the world would have been destroyed if he didn't revive him, so he left him with only 10% of his power, telling him to behave during class. He returns to his seat, and to everyone's surprise, Nisgalia continues the lesson as if nothing happened. Anos believes Nisgalia is trying to find the vessel of the child of God, who was created to kill him, and Eleanor asks him what he will do about it. But he thinks he just needs to find the God's child and put him in his place. They discuss how to find him, and Eleanor suggests splitting into groups, as Anos decides to talk to Melhace about it. But Eleanor receives a message from Led, who reveals that he discovered a strange spell left by Jurga. Misa tells Ray that she didn't find any information about the God's child, and he mentions that Nisgalia is a dangerous god who helped Jurga transform his source into magic. Ray tells her he's worried about her, so he wants her to stay away from battle, but she wants to fight by his side, saying she can't be afraid of death if he's in danger. He tells her he will always be there to protect her, and they kiss, but they realize they're being watched by someone, and he introduces himself as Gerard, saying he's there to fulfill an order from Misa's father. Anos tells his fan club to organize a ceremony because he wants to spread word that he's the demon king of tyranny, thinking it will be important for hybrids and demons to live in harmony. But they're interrupted by Sasha and Misha, who reveal that Rivas was attacked. He reveals that the attacker kidnapped Professor Menno, but he was able to place a tracking spell on him. Anos thinks they're dealing with a demon from 2,000 years ago, but the sisters remain confident because they were trained by him, and they head off to find the person. Anos goes to his castle, and he realizes Melhace is in terrible condition. He tries to revive him, but he's interrupted by another man, so he stops time around him, as the man introduces himself as Zeke Ozma, one of Erdeme's advisors. Anos tries to explain that Erdeme was possessed by a god, but Zeke already knows, revealing that Erdeme offered his own body to create the greatest enemy of Anos. Eleanor meets with the heroes, but discovers that they've been poisoned, as a man named Zabro appears, saying he's the lieutenant of King Gilceris. Meanwhile, Sasha and Misha find Menno's kidnapper, but the girl reveals that Menno was just a tool to lure them in, introducing herself as Rinka, a subordinate of one of the evil kings. Zeke knows that he's no match for Anos, so he suggests a challenge, proposing to reveal who the child of God is if Anos can guess his identity with 18 questions. But if he fails, he will lose his powers for 5 seconds, and Zeke warns him that he can also lie in one of his answers, but Anos thinks it's too easy, saying he can guess it in only 9. Zeke gets irritated, but he agrees to it, and the two seal the pact. Ray and Misa follow Gerard, and she sees a sword just like the one her father gave her. Gerard suddenly stabs her with it, but he realizes his blade was cut by Ray, who wonders how he got the sword. Meanwhile, Anos asks Zeke if the child of God is one of his subordinates, and he confirms it, but Anos thinks he could be lying. He thinks it can only be one of the girls, so he asks about Misha and Sasha, but Zeke denies it, and he also mentions that it isn't Zeshia. Anos asks him if it's Misa, and he confirms that it is. But he realizes that Zeke might have used his lie, so he asks if the child of God is half-spirit, but Zeke denies it. He starts thinking, using his questions to eliminate options, and mentions that the game is fun because there isn't a correct answer. He realizes that Zeke implanted false memories into his brain so that he wouldn't need to lie. But he thinks Anos figured it out too late, since he has already signed the contract. He ends up losing the game, and the pact is activated, taking away his powers, as Zeke kills Melhace, but Anos defeats all of them with his bare hands. He notes that Zeke's priority was to kill Melhace, but reveals that the real one is still alive. Ray and Misa discover that Gerard works for one of the 4 evil kings, and that he was ordered to steal Misa's source. He reveals that she's the daughter of the mother of spirits Leno, and her source could be used to control other spirits. Ray attacks Gerard, but he ends up taking damage, as Gerard explains that his shield attacks the enemy's source. But Ray doesn't die thanks to his 7 sources, and he finally defeats Gerard, who realizes that he's the reincarnation of Conan. Meanwhile, Zabro turns the heroes into zombies to fight Eleanor, but she manages to stop him using her magic. He admits that she's strong, and reveals that Zeshia was actually created to carry the power of a god, wanting to experiment on her. He creates a magic circle, attacking the entire school, and the academy's students suddenly turn into zombies. Zeshia prepares to fight, but Eleanor decides to run, because there are too many of them. Meanwhile, Rinka reveals that Misha and Sasha were created thanks to the gods, because they were responsible for altering Ivas's spell, but they think she's wrong, saying the only person they owe their lives to is Anos. Eleanor and Zeshia reach a purple crystal, but they're surrounded by zombies, and Zabro uses a spell on the crystal to steal their powers. But Eleanor manages to create a magic shield, and she casts a spell to destroy the crystal, before healing all the students. Rinka fights the girls using a magic sword, and the sisters combine their powers to attack her, but she manages to pierce Sasha's body, preparing to finish her off. So Misha tries to use her ice chains to stop Rinka, but she easily breaks it, stabbing Misha through the chest. She thinks she's won the battle, but her sword suddenly shatters, and she's surprised to see Misha get back up. She shows her true power, and Rinka is terrified to see a Delskade made of ice, realizing Misha has awakened. Zeke wonders how Melhace is still alive, so Anos reveals that he created a clone of him after learning Eleanor's spell. He tells Zeke that he lost the moment he tried to challenge him, and Zeke takes his own life. But Anos revives him as an owl, and makes him reveal his plan, so he explains that his job was to reduce Anos' power by killing Melhace. Anos' team joins them after dealing with all the opponents, and Melhace mentions that humans are still afraid of the Demon King of Tyranny. So conflict may arise, and he suggests telling the truth along with Conan at the Second Life ceremony. Melhace also reveals the name of the leader of the Unitarians, and Anos learns that it's Shin, his former right-hand man. Melhace mentions that he tried to tell him before, but he couldn't find him anywhere, so Anos explains that he was busy creating a city beneath Delskade for the 10,000 Zeshias. He wonders why Shin doesn't show up, but Melhace explains that Shin is waiting for him in the spirit forest. Ray shows Anos the other half of Misa's sword, which he took from Gerard, so Anos joins the two halves, revealing that it's Shin's sword. So Anos smiles, and tells them they will go to the spirit forest in Aharthran, but Ray thinks they can't take their eyes off Niscalia. So Anos reminds him that gods must always keep their promises, and they just need to have a field lesson in Aharthran, where he needs to attend as their teacher. He transports them there, and his fan club gets excited being teleported by Anos, thinking the experience is like a first kiss. Niscalia approaches them and explains the theme of the field class, as Sasha thinks he's too involved in the role of a teacher. Anos goes to the city with Sasha and Misha to gather information, but they see a girl being attacked by humans because she keeps saying the spirit forest exists. But Anos appears in front of them, and the men threaten to beat him up, but he easily knocks them down. After that, the girl reveals that she has lost all her memories, but she still recalls that her name is Lena, and she needs to reach the spirit forest. She reveals that she gathered rumors about the place, and she thinks the only way to get there is through the mist that appears in the fields during an eclipse, saying they need to make the spirits laugh for them to appear. But Anos sees no reason to wait, and begins to move a planet using his powers, creating his own eclipse. They go to the field, and realize that the mist has appeared. Lena is happy, and she explains that they need to make the spirits appear to take them to the forest. The others join them, but they can't make the spirits laugh. Anos sees his fan club running towards him, so he wonders why the girls are excited, and one of them explains that they went shopping and found an item called the Club of Anos. He looks at the club, and then returns it to her, leaving her completely red, and at that moment, the spirits appear, laughing at the girl. The spirits find the fan club funny, and soon recognize Anos as the Demon King of Tyranny. He asks them if they can show him the way to the spirit forest, so they lead the way. He waits for the others, as Niscalia appears, and promises that he won't try anything. In the spirit forest, Anos asks the spirits about Shin, but they haven't seen him, and they realize that Lena looks like Leno, but they reveal that she was killed 2,000 years ago. Misa feels sad hearing this, remembering that Gerard said she's her mother, and the spirits start gathering around her, telling her she smells like Leno. So she realizes it's true, and she asks them about her father, but they fly away, saying it's a secret. They arrive at a large tree, where the spirits mention that there's a demon inside. Everyone realizes it's the Spirit Academy, and they meet Gilcirus, one of the 4 evil kings. Eleanor remembers his subordinate Zabro, but he assures her that it was his superior's fault, and he never wanted Zabro to attack them. Anos asks him who's giving him orders, but the other evil kings Aegis and Kylum appear, and Aegis mentions that it's not what it seems. A bell suddenly rings, and Lena remembers the spirit Aninian, who appears as a talking tree. The doors close, and he warns everyone that they're now in his class, saying they can't leave the Spirit Academy unless they pass his 3 tests. He explains that the minimum score to pass is 80 points, and those who fail will be captured by the Wolf of Hiding. Any form of violence is strictly prohibited, and if they pass, they will have an audience with the Spirit King. But Anos is in a hurry, so he asks him to conduct all 3 tests at once. Aninian agrees to do it, but he raises the minimum score to 90 points, and he mentions that the test will take place in a week. Gilcirus wonders why Anos would make such a request, but he's certain that he and his team will get a perfect score, and he tells Gilcirus to tell him about his superior if they win. They make a pact betting Anos' origin, but Misha reminds them that it's a test about spirits, so they might fail. But Anos is sure that Lena can help, knowing that she's a spirit. He tries to recover her memory, but it doesn't help much, and he realizes that it's not a simple memory loss. They start studying, and Anos helps them learn faster. He notices that there's no written word about Lena, but he realizes that a page has been torn out, and it's a book about the love fairy named Fran. When the first test begins, Anos starts answering the questions, thinking it's too easy, so he wonders why Gilcirus bet that they wouldn't succeed. But Gilcirus uses his power to speak to Anos, telling him his subordinates aren't finding it so easy. He thinks Gilcirus tampered with the questions, and he stands up to look at their answers. So Gilcirus accuses him of cheating, but he reveals that he has already finished. The test ends, and the scores are announced, as we learn that the evil kings failed the test, while everyone in Anos' group got a perfect score, and Zeshia's score is 150 out of 100. Gilcirus thinks they cheated, so he starts inspecting the scripts and finds strange answers. He mentions that Anos' group answered they didn't know for some of the questions, but Anos reveals that even reason can be destroyed with his sword. Aninian announces the start of the second test, but Anos asks Gilcirus to fulfill the pact and tell him who he's working for. Anos wonders if Gilcirus' superior is the Spirit King, so he realizes that he has no choice but to confirm that Anos is right. He receives a signal from Melhace, who mentions that the Demon King's return ceremony is almost ready, and they can broadcast to everyone that Avos Delhevia is a fraud, but he sees Niscalia smiling as he watches him. In the second test, Aninin gathers Anos and the other students, explaining that they need to climb to the top of the great tree while the spirits impose tests on them. He mentions that they must choose one of the 20 staircases, but only 5 doors lead to the top, and opening the wrong door would send the candidate back down. Eleanor wonders why the test is based on luck, and Sasha thinks they have better chances since they have more candidates. But Anos is sure that the evil kings prepared something to help them choose the right stairs, so he thinks of a way to make his team pass. He suddenly uses magic to divide his power to protect everyone who fails, and his teammates transform into him. Anos realizes he chose the right staircase, asking his friends if they picked the right door, so Ray and Misa mention that they also got lucky. Lena suddenly joins Anos, explaining that she remembers a secret passage. They advance to the top of the tree as they find another staircase and continue their way up when Lena finds another secret passage. Upon entering the portal, they end up in a flower field, and Lena thinks the place looks familiar. She runs to a grave, and she becomes sad without understanding why. Ray and Misa also meet, so Ray picks her up in his arms, and they go to the next floor when they suddenly encounter the wolf of hiding Janelle, but he decides to let them pass. On the other hand, a girl named Gist suddenly emerges from the shadows, mentioning that they can talk there without anyone else hearing. Anos wonders if she's rebelling against the Spirit King, but she reveals that Kylam was taken by the wolf under the Spirit King's orders. Lena is confused because she resembles Kylam, but Anos explains that he has a split personality due to his 2 different sources. One of the personalities was Kylam, but the second was his girlfriend Gist, so it seems that the 2 were separated. She reveals that Gerard attacked them because the Spirit King is threatening Kylam, and he also took a hostage to make the King of Curses side with him. She reveals that the Spirit King promised to protect the spirits after Leno's death, and she shows Anos' face as he realizes it's Avos Delhavia, who's probably the same one who appeared at the sword tournament with Ray. She begs Anos to save Kylam, and Anos promises to do it. Meanwhile, Ray and Misa pass through the door and see the Spirit King's castle. They enter the building and later gain an audience with the Spirit King, asking him if he hates Anos. But Ray learns that they need to break his mask so that he will answer their questions, and Ray prepares to take him on. Ray and Avos attack each other, and Ray is surprised because it seems like he has fought him before. A girl suddenly appears, and she traps Ray as Avos attacks him, but Misa runs to save him. She reveals her true form, and she starts supporting Ray as he advances to attack Avos. He uses his power to finally overwhelm him, but Avos uses spiritual magic to regenerate his mask, and he also manages to trap Ray. He prepares to deliver the finishing blow, but Misa takes the hit in Ray's place. Meanwhile, Anos and Lena arrive at the entrance of a Hearthron and see Aegis facing Janelle. Janelle tells them that he will allow whoever captures him first to pass, so Aegis suggests they join forces, explaining that Anos can go ahead while he rescues the hostages. Anos protects Lena with a barrier and tries to capture Janelle with Aegis's help. But Lena is suddenly taken, and Janelle disappears, as Anos wonders why he's after her. Aegis tells Anos to follow the path to a Hearthron, and promises to rescue his teammates. So he prepares to leave, telling Aegis that he hopes they won't need to fight each other in the future. On his way to the Spirit King, Anos encounters Gilcirus, who mentions that it's a spirit trial, so Anos needs to fight him to pass. He summons red crystals, explaining that the rule is that they can only use the magical power of the crystals. He mentions that they have the same magical power, so the one with the more sophisticated spell is going to win. He shows his spell, revealing that it's a forgotten magic from his predecessors, and he spent the last 2,000 years perfecting the formula, which amplifies magical power to its limit. He uses all of his crystals in a single attack, destroying everything around them. But Anos isn't impressed, and overcomes Gilcirus with his spell, revealing that he already surpassed that level of power 2,000 years ago. Anos arrives in the presence of the Spirit King, but realizes that it's actually Misa. He discovers that she's the child of God, and that her source was fused with Avos Delhavia, the spiritual being created from the rumor of 2,000 years between humans and demons. He remembers that Zeke tried to kill Melhace, and believes that his plan was to delay the ceremony, where they would reveal that Avos Delhavia is a fraud, because she couldn't maintain her existence without the rumor. But Avos mentions that it's too late, because all the demons in Delskade believe in her, so he's been stripped of his title, and Anos knows that she wants the Sword of Destruction. The 7 elders attack him, but he laughs, telling her to enjoy her moment until the true Demon King returns, and he teleports away. Anos returns to his subordinates at the Spirit Academy and explains that Misa is the daughter of God, and half of her was formed by the rumors about Avos Delhavia. Ray feels guilty about it, because he was responsible for maintaining the rumor, but Anos tells him not to worry about the past. Sasha wonders if Misa will disappear when they reveal the truth, because she's made from the lie about Avos Delhavia, but Anos is confident that he can find a way to resolve it. He believes Avos should seek support from the royalty, so they must protect the hybrids for now. Eminion suddenly appears and traps them, because he can't allow them to harm Leno's daughter, but Anos has no intention of staying, and casts a spell to escape the academy. The group encounters an old subordinate of Anos, who wants to take his source. Aegis suddenly appears, revealing that he has rescued the hostages, but all his old subordinates are all under Avos's command. He tells Anos that he will take care of the man, so Anos thanks him for his help, and he escapes with the rest of his team. He finds Len on his way after she was rescued by Aegis, and asks if she knows a way out. She explains that they can't leave using the normal way, so she asks the spirits for help to leave the forest. They agree to her request, opening a portal to exit the spirits' territory, and Anos transports everyone back to Delskade. But the gate suddenly opens, so he hides their presence, as the demon General Elio appears, leading his troops to search for them. Anos appears in front of him, but Elio and his soldiers kneel before him, explaining that not everyone in Delskade believes Avos Delhavia is the true demon lord. Elio reports the situation, revealing that the city is under a spell that implants Avos' will. The royals are under his influence, and he explains that the demons from 2,000 years ago suffer more, because they're under the direct command of the Demon King. Elio explains that the royalty has formed a faction, and is now attacking the hybrids, with Avos giving them a spell that allows them to absorb magic power from hybrids. Meanwhile, Anos' mother is worried about him, but his father assures her that he will return safely. Emilia runs through the city, when she's suddenly attacked by a group of royals for being a hybrid. They beat her up, and they start draining her energy, but Anos' mother intervenes. The nobles go to attack her, so her husband protects her, but they easily defeat him. Emilia remembers how she treated the hybrids, and she pushes Anos' mother out of the way, as she gets hit by a fire spell. The man laughs, but Anos arrives just in time, and quickly traps the royals, blowing them to pieces, as he decides that they will remain that way until the city is finally free from Avos Delhavia. His mother is happy to see him again, and she decides to make cookies for Emilia, as his father mentions that he's proud of him because his harem is still growing. Sasha is surprised that his father is okay after the beating, so Anos reveals that he cast a self-healing spell on him before he left the house. They begin to think of a plan to enter Delskade, and Sasha wonders why Misa doesn't just take his sword if she has the title of Demon King. But Anos reminds her that no one has survived after seeing his sword, so there's no rumor about it. Ray wonders if Avos can't use the places that aren't included in the lore, and Anos confirms it. Everyone realizes this is the reason why he plans to use the city of Zeshias, since only they know about it, so Avos' surveillance shouldn't reach it. They prepare to go, but Emilia appears, wondering why he saved her. So he explains that it's because she protected his mother, asking her if she still wants to be a royal now that she has spent time as a hybrid. But she can't answer him, and begins to cry, as Anos leaves for the city of Zeshias. He walks through the city with his friends, and they reach a portal. Anos explains it's connected to the dungeon of his palace, but he thinks the enemy will be waiting for them. Everyone tells him they're ready, and they go to retrieve his sword. They walk through the dungeon, as Sasha mentions that they need to hurry, but Anos silences her, as he sees someone approaching. He recognizes them as Lucha, a demon from the mythical era, and she's with a group of soldiers along with Rivist and Menno. Anos hides his presence, as they pass by, but he notices Rivist wearing the mark of the divergence, so he gets his attention. Rivist suggests staying behind to check the area once more, so Lucha leaves them, and continues on her way. Anos reveals himself, and Menno is relieved to see them. She explains that almost all the royals are under Avos' influence, and the hybrids are being imprisoned to serve as a source of mana. Anos asks her to find the location of Nisgalia, and he mentions that he needs to investigate something in the treasure room, saying he will use a time reversal spell to discover what happened to Leno and Shin 2,000 years ago. He wonders why Misa only has memories from the last 15 years, since half of her origin is the rumor about Avos Delhevia, thinking she should have been born 2,000 years ago. He believes that Leno can help them understand what's happening, as he mentions that everything started with her death. Ray wonders why he needs to go to the treasure room, so he reveals that he wants to use the magic of the Guardian of Time's scythe to go back to the past. Rivest suggests drawing the enemy's attention by attacking him, and Anos agrees to do it, but he mentions that it will be excruciating. He uses a powerful curse on Rivest, and Lucha rushes over as she hears his screams, realizing that he's under an ancient curse. Minnow tells her Anos has gone to the upper floor, and they leave to search for him. But he reveals himself to Rivest, explaining that he can't heal him yet, because Lucha might discover his plan. But Rivest mentions that he's fine, and tells him to unmask the false Demon King. Anos arrives at the treasure room, and Eleanor wonders if he's going to change the past. So he explains that he can't make a significant change, because it would create a temporal paradox, so he should only observe what happened to Shin and the others. He uses the power of the 10,000 Zeshias along with the scythe, and he's able to create the ultimate time magic. They travel back to the mythical era, and Anos imagines that Leno must be arriving back at the spirit forest with Shin. He explains that even though they can't make a significant change to the past, but small changes can remain. Ray mentions that Anos being alive in this time is a big change, so he tells Ray to cover his origin using magic. They go to the human city wearing their disguise, and decide to get food, but Leno also arrives, and Shin accompanies her, using a mask to hide that he's a demon. She tries to buy food, but everything has already been taken by Eleanor. She sees Leno frustrated, so Zeshia runs to offer the sweets they bought, and Leno thanks her, giving her cookies before leaving. Anos tells the girls not to get too close to them, and he hides them as well. He tells Lena that Shin might be the spirit king she wants to meet, asking her if she remembers anything about him. But she explains that she isn't sure yet, and she feels like something bad is about to happen. Leno and Shin finally cross the barrier and reach the spirit forest, but the place is devastated, and divine beasts appear. Shin jumps to attack them, but Anos notes that the hunting dogs of the gods shouldn't have passed through the barrier. The beasts notice him, and he decides to teach Sasha a new spell, using her eyes to deal with the dogs without being noticed. But Leno senses their presence, and tells them to reveal themselves, so Anos introduces himself as Anash. He calls the others, saying they're traveling performers, and Leno finds them amusing, but she wonders how they passed through the barrier. She asks Shin if they seem suspicious, but he stares at Anos, confirming that he's just a traveling performer. Shin wonders what the group is doing in the forest, so Anos explains that he wants to research something. He introduces Lena, and asks Leno if she can do something about her memory loss. She pulls him aside to talk, and explains that Lena is the love fairy Fran, who wanders in search of her memory. He wonders why she didn't say it in front of everyone, so she reveals that Fran disappears whenever she discovers she's the love fairy, and she must remember her love first. But a monster suddenly appears, and it attacks them, so Ray jumps in to stop it. Their swords couldn't travel to the past, so Anos asks Shin to summon his sword. He gives the sword to Ray, who cuts the monster, impressing Shin with his skill, and he agrees to lend the sword to him. Leno calls the spirits to heal the forest, and wonders how the divine beasts entered through the barrier. Anos thinks they didn't enter, but were already in the forest before the barrier was built. So she becomes fearful, and wonders if Nisgalia is still in the forest, but Shin reassures her that he will protect her. The spirits appear to be worried, and they mention that Grandma is going to disappear, so Leno decides to say goodbye to her. They arrive at the ancient Great Spirit Tree, which greets Anos, and introduces herself as Miglanov, the spirit that grants wisdom in times of war. She decides to give leaves to Anos and his team, to ensure wisdom for battle, but she realizes that he doesn't need one. He asks her why she's going to disappear, so she explains that the war tree must be forgotten when the war ends, so that a new tree with another purpose can emerge. Leno cries, begging her not to go, but she tells Leno that there will come a time when she will need to choose between protecting her rumors and lore, or defending something important to her. Miglanov disappears, and Shin tries to comfort Leno, so she smiles, mentioning that the Demon King didn't ask him to do it. Her tear falls to the ground, creating the new teaching tree in Union, and she goes inside him, saying he will be a teacher for times of peace. Anos wonders if she can create spirits freely, but she explains that it's not exactly true, as she can only do so when her emotions overflow, and there are also spirits that can be born without having anything to do with her. She asks Shin to accompany her and leaves, as Anos tells Rei and Misha to keep an eye on them while he goes to do his research. He goes to an union, but realizes that he only has a few books about spirits. He asks Eleanor and Zeshia to search anyway, hoping to find the book about the love fairy, so that he can read the missing page. We see Shin accompanying Leno, as Rei and Misha watch them entering the secret portal. Leno shows Shin the tear flowers, which absorb her tears to create new spirits, and she plants it in the soil, before using her tears to water it. She asks him to give it a try, so he starts watering them, but the flowers begin to wilt, and she explains that he must water them with love. She suggests that he think about the love he feels for the Demon King, but he explains that he doesn't know love, saying he only served Anos because he saved his life. The spirits arrive to thank Shin for saving them, and she suggests they play tag. She mentions that he will do whatever they ask if they can escape him, but he catches all the spirits in an instant. She explains that he lost because he didn't capture her, so she starts thinking about what she will ask him to do, but she senses the presence of Erdeme in the forest. They go to meet him, and he reveals that Niscalia sought him out, telling him he wants Leno to be the Matrix to create the child of God, who will defeat Anos when he reincarnates. Shin quickly uses his sword, and throws him to the ground, but Erdeme laughs, and mentions that he isn't an ally of the gods. He explains that Anos' only flaw is that he has no weaknesses, so no one can be his enemy, and it prevents him from becoming even stronger. Sasha and Anos arrive, as Erdeme wonders if the child of God can be a worthy opponent for Anos. He tells Shin and Leno to stop the child of God from being born, because if they can't stop him with their powers, then he's worthy of being Anos' enemy. Erdeme laughs like a maniac, and Leno thinks he's strange, but Shin sheathes his sword, and asks him to take them to Niscalia. They go to a river, but Shin doesn't sense Niscalia's presence. Erdeme explains that he has a way to make him appear, but he pulls out an hourglass and suddenly attacks Leno. Shin wonders what he's doing, so he explains that he's trying to make Niscalia appear, knowing he won't let the mother of the child of God die. Erdeme thinks Shin shouldn't bother protecting the one who will give birth to the child of God, but he stabs him, explaining that his master isn't weak enough to let Leno die just to protect himself. Erdeme falls, but comes back to life laughing, and we learn that he's now fueled by the power of the gods. He reveals that he lent his body, and is now the host of Niscalia, saying his true plan was to die to force him to appear. Niscalia suddenly takes control of his body, and asks Shin to kneel before him, but he points his sword at him, so Niscalia summons the divine beasts to attack him, but Shin cuts them down, asking Niscalia what he's trying to accomplish. He calls Shin the god-slaying sword, and explains that serving Anos will never fill the void in his heart. He assures him that no matter how many times he's reborn, his origin will never feel love, but Leno suddenly attacks, saying Shin is a kind soul. But Niscalia explains that she doesn't know him, revealing that he isn't a demon, but a magical sword. Niscalia explains that the god-slaying sword Shinreglia was created by the ancestors of demons to fight against the gods, and even after gaining a body and consciousness, he will never be able to experience the love he seeks. So no matter how much he desires, he will never be anything more than a sword. But Niscalia assures him that the gods can change the order and finally give him love, and all he needs to do is create the child of God. But he cuts off Niscalia's head, saying he doesn't need love. Niscalia mentions that the order of God is absolute, as Shin stabs him, and he disappears into thin air. Leno thanks him for protecting her, and promises that she can teach him what love is. We see a boy running, but he's stopped by the guards, so he explains that he needs to see the Demon King, but they tell him to leave, revealing that the Demon King is dead. The next day, Anos approaches Leno, and wonders if it's possible to change his spirit's lore without changing its name or essence. But she explains that she isn't sure, as the essence of a spirit comes from the lore when they were first born. He thinks about Avos Delhavia's essence being the Demon King of Tyranny, and realizes that changing it won't be simple. But she explains that the lore that appears after the essence can change, and it will also affect the spirit. Rei is sparring with Shin in the flower field, when Lena appears to water the flowers. Shin is surprised at how quickly Rei has improved, noticing that Rei is using his moves. So he decides to show a secret technique, and Rei manages to block it, but he still gets hit on the shoulder. He asks about what happened, so Shin explains that he learned that move after being defeated by the hero Kanan, revealing that Rei blocked it in the present, but the strike cut him in the past. He goes to water the flowers with Leno, but they still wilt, because he can't use love, and she assures him that she can teach him. Anos asks Misha if she has seen anything strange lately, and the spirits tell him they saw a headless demon leading the forest. He realizes it's Nisgalia, so he decides to investigate. They head to Delskade, and Anos explains that in this era, there's someone who knows everything about the world. He mentions that the goddess of creation Militia might know the whereabouts of Erdame and Nisgalia, and he explains that despite disturbing the order of the gods, he's still an ally to a few of them. They see the boy from before, and Anos remembers that he's Igarith, the seventh heir of the human kingdom who was imprisoned in Delskade, and should have been freed after his death. The soldiers take Igarith to the arena, and a demon named Davidra decides to avenge his child who was killed by Jurga during the war. He starts beating Igarith, and the other soldiers watch, as he pleads for help. Misha can't bear the sight, but Anos reminds her that even if they help, the past won't change. Davidra decides to burn Igarith, who screams the Demon King's name, so Anos appears to rescue him, mentioning that he can at least save him from the dream. Davidra wonders why a demon is saving a human, but Anos asks him what Igarith did to him, and whether the Demon King permitted this. Anos thinks he's no different from humans, so he becomes enraged and attacks Anos, who takes the hit, as Davidra wonders why he didn't try to defend himself. He asks them to let go of their hatred, but Davidra cries, and says he can't be like the Demon King, as he launches another attack. So Anos uses his eyes of destruction to stop the spell, and Davidra recognizes Anos' eyes, so he bows to him and apologizes for not being able to protect him. Anos decides to give a direct message from the Demon King of Tyranny, promising that they will see each other again after 2,000 years, and assures him that a beautiful world awaits them. He saves Igarith and lets him rest in a tower, as Anos and Misha notice that the Sword of Destruction is active. He wonders how it has already appeared, realizing that someone from this era predicted he would return from the future and prepared it. But he realizes it might be his salvation, and finally wields it, mentioning that with this Sword of Destruction, he can change the past. Igarith wakes up and runs to Anos, telling him that on the way back to the human kingdom after being freed, they were attacked by monsters, and he managed to escape thanks to the soldier's sacrifice. He calms down, and he starts describing the monsters, as Anos realizes it was a dragon, but he thought they were extinct. He explains that he came from the future, telling Igarith he still needs to be saved. But Anos mentions that he needs to kill him, so that he can be reborn through this Sword of Destruction, and become an existence that even the gods of time can't detect. Igarith agrees, and asks if there's anything he can do in return, so Anos asks him to start a rumor about Avos Delhavia when he's reborn. He promises to fulfill Anos' wish, and Anos erases his existence. There are inscriptions that appear on the wall, and it's a message for Anos. The writer wants to meet him again in the future, and he mentions that he will fall in love again, as Anos realizes it was written by someone who predicted he would travel to the past. It begins to get dark, and they talk about the goddess of creation Militia. Anos explains that she's a gentle goddess, and the essence of the world she created is her order of affection. So she always responds if a person wishes for something with all his heart, which is why Anos thinks Shin will be able to find love. He remembers the promise he made to her, that if the gods bring about tragedies that can't be undone, he would destroy everything. Misha mentions that the world is at peace in the future, but he thinks it still doesn't seem like enough. They find another inscription at night, and it mentions that Nisgalia is in the cemetery of warriors. Misha notes that the person who wrote it knew that Anos would come, and he believes it must be Militia, thinking she's watching over the world. They go to the cemetery, and Anos thinks about all the people he couldn't protect. He's sad that he can't enjoy the future with them, and Misha uses her magic to create a flower field, believing that everyone's feelings are still there. He thanks them for their help, and promises that all of their efforts won't be in vain, because there will be peace in the future. Meanwhile, in a house nearby, Erdame talks to Zeke about Nisgalia, saying his essence is still trapped in the spirit forest, and he's almost dead. But Erdame explains that it's all a part of his plan, and he intends to replace Nisgalia as the father of the gods. But Zeke thinks he shouldn't underestimate the gods, and reminds him that the magic to steal a god's power is incomplete. but he explains that Avalosdelhevius should be able to complete the spell, so he just needs to use it to steal Niscalia's power, and he believes that Conan will soon meet Leno and Shin. Anos and Misha listen from outside, realizing he plans to make use of Conan's plan. They go to meet Leno, and Misha seems worried about her, but Anos reminds her that they came to witness her death from the beginning. In the spirit forest, Conan tries to convince Shin that they should spread rumors about a false demon king to save Anos from the war against humans in 2,000 years. Shin mentions that his master can overcome them, but Conan reminds him that Anos gave his life to prevent the war, so they must stop him from killing humans again. Shin refuses to help Conan, threatening to kill him, but he calls Shin selfish for leaving everything in Anos' hands. He mentions that he wants to be worthy of being Anos' friend in the future, so Shin sheathes his sword, telling him he will follow his master in the future, and decides to leave. Leno mentions that he won't interfere with Conan's plan, and he tells her he was expecting to be killed, but it seems Shin has changed. She thinks it's because she taught him about love, and Conan notices that she's also in love, making her realize her feelings for Shin. She runs to him, declaring that she's in love with him, but he mentions that he doesn't have love within him, and he thanks her for the time he spent in her company. He mentions that he defeated the last divine beast, and Niscalia is too weak to harm her, so he must leave to reincarnate with his master. She thinks it's unfair, and doesn't want him to go, so he decides to give her something to remember him by, promising to give her anything she wants. She blushes, asking him to marry her, and he agrees to do it. They have their wedding at the castle gates, while the spirits in Anos' team watch. Enunion blesses the couple, and the Spirit King is born, as they kiss to seal their promises. At night, Shin admits that he's grateful to Leno for teaching him about love. She's sure he knows love, and he just needs to wait for the day it will blossom. The spirits suddenly appear, saying the ceremony isn't over yet, because they still need to have their honeymoon. Leno chases them away, and she feels embarrassed, telling Shin they can just talk and sleep. He tells her how he met Anos, revealing that when he gained a body, he challenged demons to test his power, but they were too weak. However, when he faced Anos, and he lost for the first time, Anos invited him to be his subordinate, and he realized that he had always been searching for a master worthy of wielding the god-slaying sword. He explains that Anos gave him a reason to fight, and to repay his kindness, he became his right hand. Leno understands why he wants to reincarnate to serve Anos, and she confesses that she wants to do more than just sleep with him. After that, Shin rushes to Leno after hearing that she fainted, but she wakes up and mentions that she's fine when Enunion talks to her and reveals that she's pregnant. She's surprised that demons and spirits can have a child, but Enunion explains that the lore of the child is weak, so she must spread and strengthen the rumor before giving birth. She's sure they will succeed, and thanks Shin for giving her a child, telling him to choose the name, so he decides on Misa. She knows he must serve Anos, so she tells a frog to bring a book, tearing out a page from it. She explains that it's about the love fairy Fran, and it's a spirit's charm, so they can reunite when he reincarnates. He promises not to lose the paper, saying he will return, and he prepares to reincarnate as she waits for him. But Enunion is worried about her, because her lore says she's the mother of spirits, so if she gives birth to a half-demon child, she might disappear. She decides to have the child no matter what, believing that if Shin discovers she's gone, he will cry, and finally realize he loves her, thinking it's worth risking her life to make two miracles happen. But the door to the flower field suddenly closes, and Niscalia appears. He explains that the word of the gods is absolute, and everything happened by divine will, revealing that she and Shin were just a means to fulfill God's order. She refuses to listen to him, but Niscalia shows the lore of Misa, and she discovers that it's the rumor about the false demon king. The spirits go to Shin, and he discovers what's happening, so he runs to rescue Leno. Niscalia declares that the child who will defeat Anos will be born, and forces Leno to give birth. But she realizes that her daughter is too weak to survive, so she creates the spirit of the spring of time, Izisi, ordering it to send the child 2,000 years into the future, where her rumor is stronger. Niscalia mentions that the child will defeat Anos as foretold by the word of God, but Shin silences him with his sword. Niscalia disappears, and Shin goes to check on Leno, who thanks him for protecting her. She apologizes for giving birth to the child of God, and not being able to teach him about love, asking him to be the one to eliminate Misa if she becomes a threat to the world. but he promises to spread the rumors about Avos Delhavia and create a world where she can survive, even if it goes against his master. Leno becomes emotional and thanks him for teaching her about love as a tear falls to the ground. She dies, and Shin creates a memorial in her honor. Anos' group returns to the present, and they mourn as they discover what happened in the past, but Anos mentions that they will recover everything. As they walk through the castle dungeon, a voice warns Anos that the hybrids will be executed unless he goes to the arena alone. The group realizes that it's just a ploy to buy time, so he summons clothes that will allow them to infiltrate the execution site, and Misha also changes her uniform. He asks Eleanor and Zeshia to help with the rescue, while Lena follows him to meet the Spirit King. The hybrid students are gathered in the arena, as Sasha and Misha watches them, and all 7 ancient emperors appear. Melhaze points to the first student to be executed, but a boy named Aramis volunteers to take her place. He reveals that he's a reincarnated being, so he's a greater threat than any ordinary hybrid. Melhaze decides to do as he wishes, and tells a man named Nihid to take him to the execution site, but Aramis is surprised when Nihid whispers something to him. Anos appears to talk to Menno, and she tells him the location of Avos Delhavia and the Spirit King. She notes she couldn't find Nisgalia, but he says it's enough, and sends her to join Eleanor and Zeshia. He thinks the enemies want to divide his team, and also considers that the Spirit King might be Nisgalia in disguise. Lucha detects them, so she attacks, but Ray manages to pierce her, and she wonders why he's using Shin's sword. Anos takes care of the soldiers, and he tells Ray they should split up. Anos meets with the Spirit King, but it turns out to be Misa, and he isn't surprised, revealing that Ray is also with him. Ray explains that he divided his origins so he could accompany Anos, but Avos mentions that it doesn't matter what they do because she has the advantage. She reveals that she has taken Aramis as a hostage, and she explains that he's the reincarnation of Igarith. But Anos smiles, knowing she just wants to buy time to seize his sword. Sasha and Misha think of a plan, and they need to take care of the ancient emperors to rescue Aramis. Nihid asks for his last words, so he mentions that the true Demon King is Anos Voldigode, and Avos Delhavia is a fraud. Nihid prepares to execute him, but he reveals he agrees with him, and he attacks the 7 elders, setting him free. Melhaze asks Nihid what he's doing, but he reveals that his real name is Davidra, and he serves no one but Anos, asking Melhaze if a brainwashing spell is enough to change his loyalty. He feels a headache, but he orders Gaius to execute all the students. So he prepares to attack, but is surprised by a student who reveals that she's a reincarnated being, and she has also awakened her memories. More students appear, and they attack the elders, as Melhaze casts a spell on Davidra. But he's saved by Igarith, who asks Davidra why he saved him, so he explains that he left his hatred in the past for his master. Melhaze tries to retaliate, but Sasha and Misha summon the Ice Delskade, and they use its power to turn the elders into ice cats. Anos tells Avos that the situation is slipping out of her control, but she tells him not to get excited over winning a single round, revealing that she has taken more students as hostages. She knows that only Eleanor, Zeshia and Menno haven't appeared, but they can't save all the students because they're in 5 different places. Anos wonders if she knows why so many people recovered their memories at the same time, prompting Davidra to explain that the keyword is Anash Poltikol. She doesn't understand what he means, and Anos explains that it's something only his allies know, so they can recognize each other without raising suspicion. He orders all his subordinates to help Eleanor and Zeshia, and Avos curses him. Ray leaps at her, but she dodges the attack, realizing that Anos changed the past. Ray prepares to finish her off, but Anos notices Janelle and stops his attack. But he ends up inside the spirit of the wolf, where Shin is waiting for him. He announces that he has betrayed him and draws his sword, but Anos thinks he doesn't need to point his weapon at him, promising to save Misha and destroy Avos Delhavia. But Shin doesn't listen to him and is ready to finish the battle they started when they first met. He mentions he betrayed him over the last 2,000 years by spreading the rumor of Avos Delhavia, so now he wants the mercy of the only one capable of taking him down. Anos takes his sword, saying he's proud of him, but offers him the chance to regain his dignity before sending him to where Leno is. Shin thanks his master and takes the sword to deliver his ultimate attack. He puts all his strength into the blow, but he can't cut through his hand, and Anos mentions that he couldn't do it because he's trying to be a demon and not a sword. Anos acknowledges that he has been in hell for 2,000 years, and he would grant him the death he desires if he were the same person as he was 2,000 years ago. But he explains that in this era, he has a father who wants the best for him no matter what. So he tells Shin to live and be Misa's father, showing him the half of the sword he gave her, as he realizes that Anos has become stronger than before. Rei continues fighting Avos Delhevia, knowing it's all his fault. She freezes him with her spell, mentioning that without Avos Delhevia, Misa wouldn't have been born, and tells him to join her, because she's still Misa. He thinks she's different from the girl he knows, and hopes the real Misa is still alive. But Avos says it's too late, and that this is her true self, but her necklace shines, and Rei manages to break the spell, saying that Misa is fighting alongside him. The two clash, but Avos manages to strike his source, activating a curse on him. But he's determined to win, and asks for Misa's blessing as he attacks Avos, who protects herself with a barrier. He tries to break through it, but Niscalia deactivates his divine sword, and Avos uses the opportunity to chain him. Niscalia appears, explaining that Avansmana is a sword blessed by the gods, so he can turn off its power. He tells Rei that all the origins he divided were destroyed, and now it's time for him to die after fulfilling his role and spreading the rumor about the false demon king. Avos prepares to finish him off, but her spell is destroyed as Anos returns. Niscalia offers to deal with Anos, but he's sent flying with a punch, and Anos tells him to know his place. Avos threatens to use her Eyes of Destruction, but Rei breaks free from the chains and attacks her, telling her he's her opponent. Niscalia prepares to fight Anos, reminding him that he's the father of the gods and his will is absolute. Anos thinks he just needs to defeat him, but Niscalia laughs, and he transforms into his true form. He mentions that it's impossible to destroy a god without the power of destruction, and even if Anos succeeds, the world would collapse. But he stops Niscalia's spell, and he explains that he won't allow it, asking him why he's boasting when he's no match for Shin, who thanks Anos for giving him the opportunity to avenge Leno. Niscalia shoots at Shin, declaring that they won't be able to defeat him, just like in the past. Shin pierces his chest, but he bursts into fire and uses his magic eye to create divine flames. Shin tries to attack him, but he creates more flames and summons his divine sword, breaking Shin's armor. It causes the page Leno gave him to fall to the ground, and he tries to grab it, but is stabbed by Niscalia, and Lena also feels the blow. Niscalia calls him a fool, saying the love he felt was just the god's will for him to fulfill his duty. He starts to burn Shin with the flames, as he mentions that Shin should be grateful to the gods. But Lena calls his attention, saying he's wrong, and she can finally see. She takes on Leno's form, explaining that Shin has always been capable of love, and they nurtured that feeling together, apologizing for making him wait. Niscalia realizes she used a spell to borrow the love fairy's body and gain life for a moment, but he mentions that her body can't withstand much power, so nothing has changed. He throws his divine sword and controls it to fight Shin, but she asks the spirits for help, so they appear and try to distract Niscalia, but he burns them all. They transform into their true form and attack again as she shoots an arrow at him, but he defends and intensifies his flames. She becomes worried, but she hears Miglanov's voice and sees her extinguishing Niscalia's flame. She explains that she also borrowed Fran's body to return, telling Leno not to worry. She spreads her leaves and grants battle wisdom to everyone, as Leno helps Shin by giving him more energy and restoring his armor. He attacks Niscalia, and now he can also use all the powers of the spirits to help him fight. Niscalia attacks with a barrage of swords, but Shin passes through them and manages to strike his heart. He's able to split Niscalia's source, but he reminds Shin that a god's source is invincible. But he doesn't care, and continues to cut his source into more pieces. Niscalia is caught off guard, and Shin delivers the finishing blow. Meanwhile, Rei fights with Avos, but he struggles against her because his sword has lost its power. She manages to destroy one of his sources, but he refuses to give up because he promised to save Misa no matter what. She prepares to attack him while he charges his attack, deciding to use the technique Shin taught him. It manages to separate Avos and Misa, telling Avos she won't survive for long with only half a source. She mentions that Misa is also going to die, but she explains that her dream is to create a world where hybrids and royals can coexist, and she won't let a false demon king destroy her dream, remembering everyone who helped her. Avos calls her a fool, and she casts her Geo Graze, but Rei cuts through it, slicing her in half. But her spell is completed, and she manages to wield the sword of destruction at the last second. Rei tries to attack her from behind, but she cuts him, and she turns to Misa, but she's saved by Anos, along with Shin and Leno. Avos laughs, and tells him he's too late, because the sword that makes her the Demon King is in her hands. She declares that she's now the true king of tyranny, and that he has lost everything, but he challenges her to try, and the two use their demonic eyes to cast spells at each other, causing massive explosions. She attacks using the sword, and his eyes can't stop it, so he's forced to use his hands. Her spell spreads across his body, and he begins to sink into the ground, but he suddenly grabs her source, asking her why she thought she could defeat him with the sword of destruction. He reminds her that deep down, she's just a rumor born from a lie, so she's nothing but a fraud, and he destroys her source. She falls to the ground, but swears that it's not over, because she's the child of God who will destroy him. A crystal flies into the air, and it explodes, as Nisgalia reappears. He mentions that the plan is finally complete, and it's time to awaken now that the daughter of God wields the sword of destruction. She suddenly pierces herself with it, and the entire city begins to tremble. He mentions how Anos turned the god of destruction's body into Delskade, and concentrated her powers to create the sword. But now the order of destruction will finally regain its original meaning, and all the power and destruction that has been contained for thousands of years will be spread. Nisgalia summons the god of destruction to destroy Anos and all other life, and the son of destruction appears in the sky. He declares that it's the era of the gods, but Anos asks him why he blames others for the tragedies of 2,000 years ago. He explains that gods have no will or soul, so tragedy can only be brought about by foolish life forms, and the god of destruction can destroy anything, so it's capable of defeating Anos. But he thinks it's just a natural law that the gods themselves decided, so he refuses to accept it, revealing that even the order fears him. Nisgalia mentions that gods fear nothing, but he suddenly freezes, and he asks what Anos did to him. So he explains that it's fear, and Nisgalia becomes desperate, reminding Anos that if he kills him, the world will fall into ruin. Anos asks him why he fears his own destruction if gods have no will or fear, and he challenges him to smile, saying he'll agree that Nisgalia is the order if he can do it. But if he's too afraid to smile, it means he has a will, and the gods aren't the order. He manages to laugh, but Anos reveals that it only shows he doesn't want to die, so he realizes he's been manipulated by him, and tries to attack. But Anos grabs Erdeme's source, and he suggests they make a pact, offering to do whatever Erdeme wants if he agrees not to disobey him. So he starts laughing, and agrees to the Zect pact. But Anos reveals that he transferred all of Nisgalia's power to Erdeme, leaving Nisgalia in shock, as he claims that the power of the gods is absolute, so Anos can't give it to a demon. But Anos calls him a fool, because he didn't realize that Erdeme perfected a technique over 2,000 years to steal his divine power. He analyzed the spell while fighting Shin, so all he had to do was complete it. Nisgalia thinks it's impossible, but Anos explains that now the world will be fine, and suggests turning him into an insect forever. He declares that the word of God is absolute, but Anos separates his source, and turns him into an insect. Erdeme returns, congratulating Anos for completing his spells so quickly, and taking a god's power, recognizing him as the strongest being, while crushing Nisgalia, causing the sun to disappear and bring things to an end. Misa wakes up, and finally meets her mother, but Leno can't stay with her for much longer. She begins to disappear, as she thanks Shin for giving her a happy life, so he cries, and confesses that he loves her. Misa is devastated, and blames her birth for her mother's death, but Anos appears, and says it's not true, revealing that Leno didn't disappear. But he decides to save her first, and asks Rei to kill her using the divine sword, just as the lore mentions. He doesn't have time to explain, but they trust him, so Rei uses his sword to destroy Misa's source. Anos confesses that it isn't possible to separate Misa from Avos Delhevia, so she needs to transform into another type of spirit. Rei doesn't understand what he means, so he explains that they just need to create the continuation of the lore. He reveals that it was already done thanks to Igarith, who told the humans that the Demon King destroyed by Avansmana will be reincarnated as the spirit Misa, complete in her original form. He also puts his power into Leno's Tearflower, revealing that now that abridged has become a complete spirit thanks to the new rumor, Leno never turned her back on her own lore as the mother of spirits. So she awakens with Misa, and they're overjoyed to be together. After that, the coronation ceremony is about to take place, and Misa is set to appear as the false demon king, but is too nervous. Anos notices that Shin hasn't talked to her much, and he confesses that he doesn't know what to say, so Anos tells him to comfort her. So he goes up to her, calling her brave, and he reveals that he has been watching her all this time, so he knows she's strong and kind, and he's sure she will be able to do it. She becomes emotional hearing this, and thanks her father, as the others watch them. Anos appears before the crowd, and explains everything that happened 2,000 years ago. He mentions that it all ends now, showing the great hero Kanan, the king and queen of spirits, and also the great spirit that was born from the rumors about Avos Delhavia. He declares that everyone born in Delskate is equal, and the blade of hatred is no longer needed. They present themselves to the crowd, as he announces that if anyone faces a tragedy impossible to overcome, they can come to him for help, promising to destroy anything that threatens the country. We see the fan club singing the song dedicated to him, and everyone celebrates the peace, finally recognizing him as the true demon king of tyranny. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.